Chapter 1751–1775 Supremacy Games 1751 The 100th Floor 14. The End. Meanwhile, Commander BIA, Apollo, and Felix were seen still standing in front of the floor's exit. Commander BIA had a look of concern on her face as she knew that Uranus should be closer to the tower than ever. "We need to leave now. We can't escape from Uranus if he chases after us floor by floor." Commander BIA rushed them. Her entire calculations were thrown down the drain after Felix got caught and they had to wait for 3 months until he made his move. She was relying on those 3 months to put as much distance as possible from Uranus. So, by the time he entered the tower, she should be already on the bottom 40 floors. "Go ahead and meet up with your squad. We will join you up in the jungle," Felix permitted with a composed tone as he gazed at the all-seeing eye. He had kept the menacing eye closed shut ever since its initial exhaustion for this very moment. "But... go." Without questions asked, Apollo sent Commander BIA towards the entrance on a cloud of darkness. Then, he turned to Felix and asked, "You really going for it? Eris won't sit by and watch. I have to give it a try. Based on the map's details, the eye will make it 10 times easier to cross past the tower's challenges." Felix nodded solemnly as he extended his palm towards the all-seeing eye. "You better be quick then," he added. "I have a feeling that Uranus is just around the corner." "Don't worry, I have something prepared for it." Without an ounce of hesitation, Felix commanded the all-seeing eye to shine the entrance of the 100th floor with its brilliant green beam. Whoosh! The beam cut through the dim light of the tower's interior like a lance, striking the entrance with a force that shook the very foundations of the 100th floor. The entrance began to disintegrate, particles of its existence evaporating under the relentless assault of the green light. Since even the spatial portals were made out of quantum energy, they were just as receptive to the destructiveness of the beam. In less than a second, the entrance was no longer to be seen, cutting off the 100th floor connection to the floor before it. "Let's hope this works." With a composed expression, Felix switched his focus back to all-seeing eye and started its shrinking process. Before he got caught by Eris, he had plans to leave the eye in its place and make Uranus's life hell by destroying the exit to the next floor. While he knew that the tower would recreate a new exit and entrance after some time, it would help him put a decent distance between them. But now? He desired to bring it with him on his journey, knowing that its anti-quantum beam would be more than helpful in many future scenarios. Since it was corrupted fully, he was more than able to shrink and enlarge its size based on his desires. At this moment, the eye was noticeably growing smaller and smaller. It didn't escape Eris' eyes. Yet, she didn't make a move against it. Should I stop him or help restore the entrance before it's too late? She realized that Felix had destroyed the entrance first to keep her busy, knowing that it was within her powers to recover the entrance before the tower could do it naturally. If it was left for the tower, it might take days or even months before it gets restored. She knew that by then, Felix would have already put a decent distance between them. If she turned her focus on Felix and attempted to stop him, she would succeed, but he would be able to easily leave the tower with Apollo as his bodyguard. Without the absoluteness of being in her personalized reality, other Unigens had a decent chance of surviving against her. However, she wasn't foolish to miss on one important note. If he took the eye with him and it proved to be useful on other floors, he could destroy the rest of the entrances and leave us always behind him. Eris narrowed her eyes in focus at the shrinking eye. He must not bring it with him. "Eris! What the hell is going on? Did you lead us to the wrong place? We can't find the entrance anywhere." Suddenly, she received an angered telepathic message from Uranus. He ought to feel this way as he had turned the entire area upside down and found nothing. "The Paragon has escaped my grasp and destroyed the entrance. Wait until it gets restored, I have something to deal with." Eris replied calmly, making up her mind to prioritize the destruction of the all-seeing eye. "How did you know she would prioritize the eye?" Candace remarked with an odd tone. feeling quite astonished that Felix was matching Eris in a battle of wits. In her mind, whether Eris focused on the entrance or the eye, Felix was the winner. To put the goddess of order and chaos in such a loss-loss situation wasn't easy. While her control over chaos is overpowered, it has some limitations. Felix clarified, I assumed that she would try to rewind time around the entrance area, which will help with its restoration. But, with each millisecond going by, it would get harder and harder for her to achieve it since the tower would kick off its natural restoration of the entrance. If she made her move then, it would be the same as going against the tower's authority, or more specifically, the Stone of Reality's authority. He added calmly, we all know that its authority rivals that of the universe. However, since I can do the same to the rest of the entrances with the all-seeing eye, the smartest decision is to target the eye, even if Uranus and Demeter would be held back for a couple of weeks to months. He paused for a moment before sighing, I wish she chose the entrance and left me with the eye, but I can't be too greedy. I see. Candace's eyes glistened in amazement as she watched Eris summon two massive swords, each a manifestation of the two laws she commanded. The first was forged from the essence of order and was glowing with a brilliant pure white light. The second was drawn from the depths of chaotic energy, pulsing with an ever-shifting, mesmerizing pattern. With the massive swords above her head, Eris flipped a mere page of her book and the swords arced towards the all-seeing eye with a momentum that assured destruction. Yet, just as the swords were about to make contact with the eye, Felix intervened with a saddened look. He issued a command, his voice carrying the weight of his authority over the eye. Implode. In response to his command, the all-seeing eye began to tremble, its surface rippling as if caught in an internal struggle. Then, in a spectacle that no inhabitant of the tower had ever witnessed, the eye started to collapse in on itself. Eris halted the swords on their track and manifested a simple barrier the moment the all-seeing eye self-destructed in a brilliant explosion of green energy. Boom! The sky lit up with the remnants of the eye's power while the dazzling light spread across the entire floor, flooding the mountains, the desolate trees, the hills, the fog, and the dried-out land. This light carried the same concentration and destructiveness as the green beam, causing the entire floor to start falling apart into the all-devouring void. Let's get going, we have bought ourselves some precious time. With everything that happened, I take this as a small victory. Think of it as you want. With one last glance at the 100th floor, Felix stated coldly, they are now closer than ever. With Apollo by his side, Felix turned away from the spectacle and stepped through the entrance just before the green gleam enveloped them. Whoosh! The explosion wiped out the mountain, the creepy smile on it, and the entrance within it without an ounce of mercy, leaving behind utter nothingness. As the green gleam died out, at last, the 100th floor became a vacuumed pitch-black space with a sole entity floating in it. Eris gazed at where the exit used to be and instead of feeling irritated and angered, she merely cracked a faint smile. Not bad, truly, not bad. Then, she sat cross-legged in nothingness and continued reading her book from where she left, completely ignoring Uranus' furious curses and insults flooding her mind. How could possibly you let him escape? I knew it. I knew you were working against us all along. Let us in. I will catch the vermin on my own. Eris. I understand you can hear me. Let us in. Let us in. 1752 The bioluminescent jungle floor. As Eris ignored Uranus' insults and waited patiently for both the entrance and the exits to be restored naturally by the tower, Felix and Apollo had already taken their first step on the next floor. The moment they went in, they were greeted by a sight that momentarily took their breath away. A bioluminescent floor unfurled before them, a massive jungle aglow with vivacious colors that painted a surreal scene for everyone's enjoyment. The floor itself was alive with bioluminescent flora and fauna, creating a luminous world that seemed almost dreamlike. The atmosphere was heavy with the scent of exotic plants while towering trees pulsed with a rhythmic blue that illuminated their path forward. It's like walking through a constellation, Candace murmured in wonder. A deadly constellation, Felix replied as he focused his eyes around him. While the bioluminescent jungle resembled a dreamland, he knew that it was packed with the deadliest and most bizarre creatures in the quantum realm. Creatures that would make the null voiders seem normal. Let's move quickly, I don't feel comfortable with the notion of having a couple of days as a buffer, Apollo uttered while gazing behind him, feeling like he was being separated from his hunters by a paper wall. While the entrances and exits could be restored in up to months, it could also happen in a few days. It was better to assume that their luck would screw them up. Let's group up with BIA. Felix agreed. Felix sought out Commander BIA telepathically and found out that she had already joined her squad and was awaiting them underground. While the squads had to fear for their lives of beams coming from the heavens, on this floor, everyone avoided moving on the surface level as much as possible. At the moment, all the squads who had made it inside the floor were moving underground towards the exit through digging a tunnel. Some time later, Felix and Apollo joined Commander BIA and the rest of the squad. The first thing they noticed was that more than 7 members of the mercenaries and 3 other royal guards were missing, even Scylla was gone. I can't believe you two survived. Duncan sneered. Felix ignored him and asked Commander BIA with an indifferent expression, what happened here? The jungle predator happened. Commander BIA shared with a deep frown, after I arrived, I found out that it had taken the lives of almost 50% of the survivors, our squad was no different. How come? Felix asked, the map states that it rarely leaves its territory and the entrance is far off from it. Map? How do you know the details of the map? Duncan narrowed his eyes coldly. Duncan, shut it. Commander BIA gave him a cold stare, having no interest in entertaining his ego at the moment. Duncan wasn't pleased to be told off, but he refrained from speaking again, not wanting to challenge her authority. I don't know if the floor's environment has changed and caused the monster's territory to become closer to the entrance or if it started acting out on a whim. Commander BIA stated with a solemn tone, whatever it is, the monster is on the loose and everyone is hiding underground to avoid meeting it. We can't be wasting time moving underground, it will take forever to reach the exit. Felix switched to a private telepathic conversation and updated Commander BIA on what occurred on the 100th floor. When she realized they had only a couple of days at minimum before their hunters stepped on the same floor, she also got a bit anxious. What do we do then? The jungle predator is an invincible entity on this floor. It is completely immune to any type of attack and has powerful detection and hunting skills. It's nearly unattainable to escape it without having someone else getting caught before you. The fear in Commander BIA's eyes was unmistakable, hinting at the gravity of the situation. Her reaction was still mild since she was describing the monster from the details of the map and had never seen it in action like the rest of the squad. I have seen it with my own eyes slicing Scylla into 2 halves and feasting on her corpse in less than a second, Kronos uttered, his eyes showing the reflection of the horrific scene he mentioned. In the reflection, a slender creature with silver skin, standing 5 meters tall, held Scylla's corpse above its head. Holding was the wrong description as it had long gleaming blades as arms and both were piercing Scylla's severed corpse, allowing it to munch on her body akin to eating a kebab stick. Yet, the weirder part was its legs, they were made out of bioluminescent roots, which were deeply inserted into the ground. Its head was thick from the back and thin from the front, causing its mouth to be nearly invisible. The jungle predator can use its roots to connect to the jungle's network and locate foreigners by sensing their existence near any kind of flora or fauna. It also has extreme sense to quantum law-based disturbances. Felix touched his chin thoughtfully, so, it's near impossible to travel through the forest without alerting it. This, without mentioning the rest of the dangerous creatures roaming about. Traveling underground is the smartest option as long as we avoid touching the tree roots or using our abilities. You think so, genius? Duncan couldn't help but throw another mocking remark. With one glare from Commander BIA, he lowered his head in silence and allowed Felix to continue speaking his mind. That's what you guys will be doing, Felix said calmly, I will call you up once the coast is clear. What do you mean? Plix and the rest were left bewildered as he made it seem like he planned on going to the surface and deal with the jungle predator. BIA, I leave it to you. Felix added telepathically, make sure not to lose more members. We can't afford to enter the 70th floor without them. I understand. Commander BIA nodded with a tint of guilt, realizing that after Felix had read the details of each floor, he discovered about the true purpose of the mercenaries. One thing was for sure, it wasn't for providing assistance at all. Let's go, we have a beast to catch. Felix made a gesture with his head for Apollo to follow him as he took off towards the surface. The moment he returned to the jungle, he spread out his senses far and wide. Apollo did the same and both of them discovered that their current area was relatively safe with a minimum number of creatures. The jungle predator hasn't made a move against us while we were on the move before. Felix disclosed, it might have taken a rest in its territory to digest all the victims it has eaten. Probably. Apollo queried with a serious tone, are you sure about attempting to demonize it though? Its invincibility might stretch to even evil energy, nothing is unattainable in the tower. Felix didn't need to tell Apollo about his plans as it was pretty obvious what his next step would be. Demonizing the strongest being in this tower would assist them facilitate their journey to the next floor and also slow down their enemies. It's too soon for a tower's creature to have such reality-bending abilities. Felix swayed his head, it should have immunity to only laws. Aight, let's see how it goes. Apollo shrugged his shoulders and chased after Felix, who was heading directly toward the jungle predator's territory. 1753 The Jungle Predator. As Felix and Apollo ventured deeper into the bioluminescent jungle, the air grew noticeably stiller while the vibrant night rays of the flora dimmed down. Ahead lay a large peaceful blue lake, its surface smooth and unbroken, reflecting the glowing life around it. In the center of the lake stood a solitary tree, its branches sprawling towards the sky, bathed in a gentle blue light. As Felix and Apollo approached the edge of the lake, they noticed the jungle predator hanging from the tree, suspended upside down much like a bat. Its long, blade-like arms were folded against its torso while its roots were holding into the tree. Just as Felix wanted to express his readiness to Apollo with a head nod, the predator's eyes snapped open and instantly disappeared from its perch in the blink of an eye. Felix and Apollo barely had time to register its movement before it reappeared directly in front of them. With a horrifying grace, it swung its sharp blade-like arms at them. Reacting instinctively, Felix and Apollo bent low, ducking under the sweeping arc of the predator's arms. Whoosh! The air whistled with the force of the strike, causing them to execute a synchronized backflip, putting some distance between themselves and the creature. The moment they landed on their feet, Apollo muttered, that was a bit too close. His eyes never left the jungle predator, which now stood motionless in front of them, its red eyes glowing ominously as it sized up its intruders. Its speed isn't standardized with the realm. Felix nodded with a solemn tone. While Apollo had no problem matching the predator's speed, the same couldn't be said about him. The worst part? The predator was immune to all laws, which made him realize that he needed to bring his A-game in terms of physicality. After all, there was no way it would stand still and allow him to demonize it. As expected, without nonsense, the jungle predator crouched slightly, its body language indicating another imminent attack. Then, it launched itself at them again, its sharp blades gleaming under the bioluminescent lights. This time, they were prepared for its attack even when its movements were a mere blur. Apollo reacted first and used his dark tendrils attempting to catch the predator and slow down its movement. Alas, the predator sliced through the tendrils without an ounce of resistance. Even the ones that made it past their blades ended up disintegrating into nothingness like they were touched by the hand of a god. It seems like he is immune not just quantum laws, but also the real ones. Apollo remarked with a solemn tone as he pulled the predator away from Felix. His speed alone gave the predator a run for its money. Even better. Felix smirked coldly as he released his corruption crimson mist around him, this means Eris and Uranus won't be able to get rid of it quickly. Law's immunity plus great physicality meant that the predator would be held back purely by its intelligence and battle experience. At the moment, Apollo was toying with it quite easily due to his speed surpassing it immensely. The predator seemed to be moving based on its instincts, and even when it could see that catching Apollo was impossible, it never stopped its assault. Slice! Slice! Bam! Bam! Its sharp blades kept cutting off one tree after the other, creating a loud disturbance across the peaceful jungle. This disturbance caught the attention of many other jungle natives, causing them to head toward the source. However, the moment they obtained closer to the predator's territory, none of them dared to step inside. As the apex predator on this floor, his aura alone was enough to stop anyone from having bad intentions. Bring him inside the corruption mist. Felix uttered after covering the entire lake with his evil energy, causing the central tree and even the water to get corrupted. It. With a flash of light, Apollo returned to the lake and the predator soon followed, stepping inside the crimson mist without an ounce of fear. While Apollo had a spiritual barrier to keep the crimson mist away, the predator's skin was exposed to it completely. It's working! Candace exclaimed in excitement after noticing that the predator's silver skin was absorbing the crimson mist particles instead of disintegrating them. It will be weirder if it didn't. Felix wasn't surprised. His evil energy was a unique aspect to him, and not even the quantum realm could replicate it since it never belonged to the natural order of the universe. Whoosh! Whoosh! Meanwhile, the predator had no idea that its body was slowly being corrupted and continued attacking the nearest target to it based on instincts. Even Felix caught some strays once in a while, but he easily managed to avoid the attacks by relying on the corrupted environment around him. He didn't bother to phase out, knowing that those blades were still capable of cutting him. If it wasn't for phasing out being useless against those merciless blades, Scylla and the rest of the dead royal guards would still be alive. For the next minute or less, the battle raged back and forth, with no conclusive winner yet. But, that soon changed as the corruption mist finally cracked the predator's defenses. It had soaked in it for far too long to maintain its identity. Just like the all-seeing eye, its body was demonized after the final burst needed was absorbed. Its silvery skin turned bloodish red while its gleaming sharp blades had shark teeth covering it from edge to edge. Its roots turned flesh-like, but they remained connected to the jungle's network. The moment the transformation was done, Felix felt a connection between them. With a simple raise of a hand, the frenzied predator halted a mere inch away from Felix, its blade was touching his forehead. Then, it recalled its shark-like arms and kneeled before Felix. Unfazed, Felix ordered it, "Demonize anything you see." The jungle predator slowly stood up. Then, it turned its head towards the native creatures hiding outside of its territory. Whoosh! With no words spoken, it started its hunt, leaving behind pained squeals, fearful roars, and barbaric destruction, uncaring about the well-being of its home. "Let's get the hell out of here!" Felix dusted his hands and departed towards the floor's exit on Apollo's darkness cloud, having no desire to prolong his stay. He shared the news with Commander Bia and without question asked, she ordered her squad to chase after them in a tight formation. Duncan and the rest could only get hauled along. Some time later, Felix and Apollo exited the floor at a record speed before getting followed by Commander Bia and her squad. Meanwhile, the predator was still slicing, dicing, and demonizing anything its demonic eyes landed on. With this much disturbance, it was nearly impossible for the other squads not to notice it. The predator, it has gone mad and started attacking the jungle's natives. Monkiar exclaimed in shock. What the hell? Is the map losing its touch? How come both floor masters aren't following the rules anymore? This is to our advantage. Let's head to the exit swiftly while it is occupied. Monkiar and his squad didn't hesitate to take advantage of the situation and leave the floor from the surface level. Virona, Tempusve, and even the Chaoxians did the same. After their prince transformed into a different person right before their eyes, all of them sought to exit the tower as quickly as possible. Alas, the closest tower's exit was still many floors away. Unbeknownst to them, the only reason Felix hadn't ordered the predator to hunt them down was to keep them as obstacles for his enemies. While he understood that they wouldn't be able to deal with Eris and Uranus, he believed that if they just bought them a couple of seconds, it would be all worth it. In the echoing tower, where time could either slow down or accelerate from floor to floor, those seconds could be the deciding factor. 1754 A little ambush. 7 days later, Uranus and Demeter were seen sitting in front of a spatial portal on the verge of becoming whole again. When Uranus sensed the released energy after its completion, he snapped his eyes open, showing an untamed amount of suppressed rage. "Don't do anything stupid." Demeter frowned. She could feel that Uranus had no plans to let things rest with Eris. The fact she had ignored their calls for the past week made him even more pissed. Uranus ignored her and went to the other side, forcing her to give chase. The moment she opened her eyes, she sighed in exasperation at the sight of Uranus rushing towards Eris. "Eris! How dare you change sides?" Ahead, Eris awaited him. Her demeanor was calm, unlike the storm of emotions that Uranus brought with him. She gently closed her book and placed it on her lap. Seeing that he was still being ignored, Uranus could no longer control his emotions anymore. He raised his fist, energy gathering around it, vibrating at a frequency so intense that the very fabric of space-time around them began to show signs of strain. "Look at me when I am talking to you." With a roar that echoed through the recovered floor, he unleashed his attack, a vibrational punch aimed directly at Eris, intended to shatter, not just her form, but the reality around her. It was an assault that could obliterate mountains, rend seas, and topple the very pillars of reality. Yet, as it neared its target, Eris extended a single finger, her movement delicate, almost dismissive. Immediately after Eris's finger met Uranus's vibrating fist, at that singular point of contact, all the chaotic vibrations that Uranus had harnessed were effortlessly negated. The vibrations ceased, absorbed and nullified by the laws of order that Eris wielded so masterfully. The expected destruction did not come. Instead, a mere puff of air landed on Eris' face, moving some stalks of hair away from her face. "Didn't know you were such a gentleman, thank you." Eris teased, her voice light, mocking the fury and power he had just displayed. Uranus was still burning with the fire of his intent, but he didn't throw another attack, understanding that he wouldn't be able to afford a full-blown battle against her. "Eris, mind explaining the situation?" Demeter stepped in to make amends before Uranus did something foolish again. "There isn't much to be explained, I got outsmarted." Eris waved her hand and displayed them what happened. When Uranus saw the scenes, he realized that Eris had no blame on her. Well, she could have gone a bit harder on Felix by crip-piling him or such, but he understood that Eris almost never restored to such a barbaric way of handling things. Lighting and water laws. Demeter narrowed her eyes. It seems he was able to ascend even while sealed by the universe. Fortunately, those laws are useless in here if one knows about them. Uranus said coldly, having no interest in apologizing. Indeed, if Eris knew about them, he wouldn't have been able to use either ability even if she hadn't removed them from her reality. Demeter nodded. Any ability related to internal attacks was easily defendable by Unigens since they had much better control over their bodies. Though, they needed to be prepared for the attacks. "Let's go, they shouldn't have made it to the 90th floor. We have to catch them before they arrive at the 70th, we can't leave it without sacrifices." Eris disclosed. "Share with us the map. We need it in case we get lost." Uranus demanded with an indifferent expression. "Of course." Eris waved her hands and gave them both 2 scroll copies. After a single glance, they threw the maps away and took off towards the entrance. As Eris, Uranus, and Demeter entered the bioluminescent floor of the echoing tower, their minds were focused solely on catching up. So, none of them cared about the vibrant glow of the floor that illuminated their path or the dangers that lay within. However, their rapid advance was abruptly halted after arriving at the center of the jungle. It was here that they found themselves suddenly encircled by an army of demonized creatures. Each one radiated the all too noticeable dark energy of corruption. There were hundreds of them. It seems we've walked into a little ambush. I knew he would have done something like this. Eris chuckled. Tisk, he thinks this is enough to hold us back. Uranus sneered. We should still be careful. Demeter warned as she got into battle position, those creatures can do all sorts of bizarre attacks. You can go ahead, I will deal with them. Uranus uttered coldly. All right. Neither Eris nor Demeter fought him back on his decision. Eris flipped a page in her book, attempting to switch their positions with 2 pebbles at a distance. However, her ability had failed. Oh? There must be a creature here with an ability to lock down spatial movement. She commented with a curious look. Then, you can stay and watch. Uranus had already run out of patience and decided to obliterate their foes in one fell swoop. He extended his arm to the ground and began to pull vibrational energy, causing the air to quiver, visibly distorting as waves of energy converged into a single, pulsating point between hand and the ground. However, as the energy reached its peak, Uranus detected an unexpected anomaly. The vibrations started to diminish in intensity as if being suppressed. Confused, he opened his eyes and scanned the battlefield, his gaze finally settling on Eris. Don't look at me. With a nonchalant shrug, she gestured at their surroundings, telling him that it must be the doing of another native creature. There were hundreds of them, and if there was one capable of blocking spatial movement, it wouldn't be surprising for another to have a way with vibrations. As expected, when Uranus searched for the source of the interference, he quickly noticed a small peculiar bird phasing in and out of existence while radiating a different kind of aura. An aura that seemed to absorb and neutralize vibrational energy in the area. What a joke! Uranus snickered in derision as he extended his arm towards the bird. Then, just like he caught its neck, he tightened his grip and the bird ended up imploding instantly, releasing powerful vibrational waves across the jungle. The moment the bird died, all the native beasts and creatures turned their focus on Uranus. Then, with a murderous demonic glare, they charged at them together. Rumble rumble! Each one used their powerful unique capabilities to deal as much damage as possible to their enemies. Spatial abilities, temporal attacks, light/darkness-based projectiles, and even some peculiar never-seen-before energies. Eris, I kindly need your help, Demeter uttered with a solemn tone. Of course, darling. Eris flipped to another page and suddenly, a rock symbol mark appeared on Demeter's forehead. Using her chaos laws, she made it possible for Demeter to have temporary control over quantum laws that correspond to the Earth, just like the ground beneath them right now. The moment it manifested, Demeter slammed her hand on the ground, and the entire bed collapsed, creating a massive sinkhole, where all the rushing creatures fell underneath it. She fell with them while Eris and Uranus remained hovering in the sky, anticipating the barrage of projectiles. 1755 The Eternal Hourglass Floor. Unfazed, Uranus waved his hand and created an invisible wall of vibration separating them and the projectiles. The moment the projectiles went through it, their form broke down and turned into colorful quantum energy. Then, he turned the same quantum energy into vibrational arrows and fired them back at each creature as they were falling down the sinkhole. Boom! 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 Unlike the jungle predator, none of them had an immunity to laws, causing them to burst into energy the moment they got pierced by the arrows. The ones who managed to escape were finished off by Demeter, using her new control over quantum earth to bring out spikes from the sides of the sinkhole and impale those creatures in an instant. Just like that, more than hundreds of jungle creatures that put nightmares into the hearts of other adventurers were taken care of. Let's go! Uranus sneered, he bought himself a second, must have been worth. Before he could finish his sentence, a sudden hazy figure burst forth with lethal speed out of nowhere. In a flash, it unsheathed its blades and aimed at Uranus' neck. Phew! The air whistled as the blade cut through, aimed to decapitate the god of cosmos. However, Uranus had never let down his guard. With a swift and somewhat relaxed evasion, he moved his head to the side and the deadly blade passed mere inches above his head, slicing through the air where he had stood a moment earlier. The jungle predator, its initial strike having missed, twisted in the air with feline agility and landed gracefully on a nearby tree. There, it perched upside down, its roots gripping the bark as it had so many times before, blending almost perfectly with the dark surroundings. Yet, its eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on the trio with a murderous glare. He even demonized the jungle predator, not bad. Uranus cracked his neck with an unbothered look. Just as Demeter was about to speak, the jungle predator made its move again and this time, it targeted none other than Eris. Eris kept dodging its dreadful attacks with the elegance of a swan, her book never left her arms. Every time an attack seemed too close, she would switch her location with another object in her field of view. Let's just avoid it and leave to the next floor, Demeter suggested after receiving the jungle predator's focus for being closer to him than the others. With her current temporary control, she was easily able to keep it at bay by manipulating the surface around her. It will keep chasing us down. Uranus replied coldly, we have to get rid of it now. How? Demeter's eyelids twitched. With its immunity to all laws, not even Eris could stop it with her chaos/order laws. As for killing it with their physical strength, it was out of the picture too, since it would take them a significant amount of time. They refused to waste more and widen the gap. I have a plan, follow me. Without saying much, Eris flipped a page off her tome and the three of them got teleported nearer to the entrance by switching their location. Then, she did it a couple more times until they were right before the exit. The predator, sensing their attempt to flee, let out a ferocious roar and pursued them through the massive network of roots underground. It took almost no time to catch up to them. The moment it saw them going through the portal, it leaped into it too, having no plans of letting them out of its sight. Alas, after opening its eyes, the sight greeting it was of the same bioluminescent jungle. Confused, it looked around it for a few moments before it realized that it had returned to the same floor. It made its way through the network of roots without any hesitation and arrived at the same exit. The creature then passed through it. However, to its dismay, it found itself back at the entrance of the jungle once again. Scree! The jungle predator could only scream in anger and confusion. However, since it was given orders to stay on them at all costs, it could do nothing but repeat the same process over and over again. Meanwhile, Eris, Uranus, and Demeter were seen traveling across an infinite golden desert with a massive hourglass above their heads. It should be stuck in an infinite loop between the exit and entrance of the jungle floor, Eris remarked casually without bothering to glance behind her, certain that she had taken care of the predator. If only it was possible for you to link us up with the lower floor's portals. Demeter sighed. She understood that Eris' dimensional configuration of those portals was possible only if she had the coordinates of a portal on another side. In this instance, she could have sent the predator to the 100th floor or outside of the tower. Well, I could send us straight to the first floor or the first 10 floors. Eris remarked calmly, but nothing guarantees us that the little paragon will stick around to reach the bottom floors. True, they could be searching for the first exit point to leave the tower. Demeter nodded in agreement. In her eyes, if she were in their shoes, she would be gone the moment she got caught once. Enough chit-chat and more walking, Uranus said indifferently, if we are lucky, we might be on the same floor as them. He stated this only because this floor was known for casting a temporal passive on everyone, forcing them to walk across the desert for eternity. It was called the Eternal Hourglass Floor. On this floor, they were not allowed to sprint, teleport, or even use other temporal-based abilities to offset the negative effect, all they could do was walk and walk. That's all due to the massive golden hourglass above their head. Currently, it was spilling sand particles and filling almost half of it. They knew that the moment the last sand particle descended to the other side, everything on this floor would be reset, including all the progress they had made, putting them back in the starting zone. If they didn't possess the map, I might have agreed with you. Demeter shook her head, too bad, they should have already found the exit and left the desert. That damned map, where did it come from, and who created it? Uranus cursed. Although he was also exploring the map's details, he wished no one else possessed seen it. In this manner, Felix, Apollo, and Commander BIA would be lost in the topmost floors, making it much easier to find them. Any theories? Demeter sought out Eris as she was also curious about the map's origin. We are in the echoing tower. Eris replied calmly, anything and everything is possible. For all we know, it could be the stone of reality itself creating it to lure in new victims. The moment Uranus heard the term victim, he shuddered in dread. He remembered some nasty memories during their mission to reclaim the stone of reality. As one of the party members who almost lost his life to the stone of reality, he possessed absolutely no aims of ever getting close to it again. Few things could scare Uranus in this universe. He could boldly proclaim that the stone of reality was at the very top of that list. Think of something to get us out of this floor quickly, we can't possibly reach the exit before the rest occurs, Uranus stated as he gazed at the half-finished hourglass. 1756 The Silent Library. While they were discussing ways to travel the desert in the shortest possible time, Felix, Apollo, Commander BIA, and the rest of the squad were seen sitting on a dark cloud ascending an ethereal, infinite staircase that spiraled upwards into a void. Each step was illuminated, shining brightly in the darkness. The vast emptiness around them was disorienting, the only sense of direction was provided by the stairs. This was the 96th floor, the staircase of solitude. It was a staircase that went on forever and ever within a dimensional void, making it impossible to find a different path than going up or down the staircase. Fortunately, with the map at hand, everyone knew the hidden exit's location. As they climbed, Felix suddenly broke the silence, his voice echoing slightly in the vast expanse. The predator has failed to slow them down. They've already reached the desert floor. Apollo, his expression darkening, cursed under his breath. Damn it, that's just 2 floors above us. At this rate, they will catch up in no time. With Eris' overpowered laws in the tower, they can move through these levels like they're nothing. Their conversation left Dankin and the rest of the squad mates utterly confused. They gazed at Commander BIA and noticed the color in her face drain a bit. We have wasted too much time on the desert floor. Commander BIA remarked with a hopeful tone, they might take as long as us. Doubtful. Felix replied sternly, the floor makes it impossible to use anything that affects the speed of the travelers. However, with Eris' intelligence and unique set of abilities, I am certain she will succeed in what we failed to achieve. You mean pulling the exit to them? Yes, I am watching them do it as we speak. He shared while spying on Eris, Uranus, and Demeter in the desert from high above. He was smart enough to bring a few demonized creatures with him and leave them along the way to keep him updated on their movements. The best part, he could spy on each floor through his evil energy connection without any risks. If he left his wisp of consciousness behind and it got caught, Eris might use her laws to turn it against him. Let me show you. Felix created a spiritual reflection that showed their enemies' movements. As expected, they were working together to bring the exit to them instead of walking to it. Commander BIA and the rest of the squad mates were shocked to see Demeter use her quantum sand laws to split the desert in front of them into 2 halves, creating the same iconic scene of Moses splitting the sea. The wilderness parted ways in a straight line for thousands of kilometers until it reached the buried exit. It was a chaotic portal suspended between 2 pillars. Eris, you up? Demeter said calmly. Eris brought out her tome and opened it from the middle while pointing her finger at the portal. Immediately after, the portal's location was switched with a small yellow rock in front of them. Just like that, the 3 of them stepped onto the next floor in less than half a minute. They are right behind us now. Commander BIA felt chills course down her spine at the notion of being caught by Uranus. She knew that her fate would be much worse than what she had gone through before. What do we do? What do we do? Commander BIA appeared anxious, biting her nails and glancing nervously behind her, feeling like Uranus was ascending the staircase with them. Can someone tell me what the F***ck is going on? Duncan uttered distressedly after noticing the fear in his commander's eyes. If even Commander BIA was losing her cool, there was no way it wouldn't rub off on the others. Felix ignored Duncan and the others' search for answers and kept looking out into the void, collecting his thoughts. We need a new strategy, he admitted, the wheels turning in his mind. Simply climbing down isn't going to cut it anymore. We need a way to either delay them further or hide our trail. I agree. Apollo nodded, stepping beside Felix and peering into the seemingly endless void below. Maybe there's a way to hide on any of the next floors, he suggested. In his eyes, if they couldn't outpace them, then, their best option was to hide on a floor and wait for them to surpass them. After they were gone, they could carry on their journey. This strategy had a chance of success only because there were shortcuts spread out on those floors. Shortcuts that could lead a traveler straight 20 floors down or even more. In other words, there was a chance of taking one of those shortcuts and arriving nearer to the 20th floor while their enemies were still searching floor by floor. Felix thought this to be a viable strategy, making him think about the characteristics of the floors they were about to pass through and think of a way to help them hide. Soon, he found out what he was looking for. I got something, he shared. There isn't any guarantee it will succeed, but it has the highest chance of keeping us hidden as they pass through our floor. What do you have in mind? Apollo inquired. The silent Libra floor. Felix narrowed his eyes in focus. Ah, I see what you are trying to pull. Apollo rubbed his chin. It is quite risky, but, we will be caught sooner or later either way, might as well risk it. If most upcoming challenges required speed, Apollo would be confident to put a great distance between him and their chasers. But, based on the map's details, the next 10 floors were going to pose great difficulty for them. It's decided then. Some time later, Felix and his squad found the floor's exit hidden in a random stair step using the map's tips. After they stepped through it, their footsteps were muffled almost instantly by the dense, sound-absorbing carpet beneath them. They stood before a vast library, its far walls and ceilings disappearing into the shadows. The atmosphere was thick with the comforting scent of old paper and leather-bound volumes. This was the silent library floor. The library was a maze-like network of corridors, each one lined with towering shelves crammed with books. The shelves were crafted from dark, richly varnished wood that gleamed under the soft, ambient lighting. Each shelf was stuffed with an uncountable number of books. The books ranged from ancient, leather-bound tomes with faded gold lettering to more modern publications. Do not make a single sound. It's too soon to draw the librarian. Commander BIA ordered her squad mates. She had somewhat explained to them the situation they were in and made them understand their lives would be over the moment they got caught by these three. Although the news was unsettling, they knew they had to accept it. They had no other choice but to follow Commander BIA's leadership, as it was the only reason they were still alive. As they ventured deeper, the silence deepened. The rules of this floor were immediately apparent. No sound could be made, as even the slightest murmur seemed to be swallowed by the surrounding tomes. Take the others and go find the exit, we will carry on with the rest. Felix ordered BIA after separating from the squad with Apollo. I can't believe each book is a complete story of a living being. Candace murmured as she gazed at the endless sea of books. This is my dream place. Lady Sphinx remarked with a tint of desire in her voice, wanting nothing more but to enter this place and read every book. Alas, she understood that her fate would end up in one of those books if she were to prolong her welcome here. This floor might seem like a library from the outside, but in reality, it was a graveyard. 1757 The Librarian Monster. Let's get started, Felix said with a stern tone after spotting their enemies rushing up the staircase. He knew that they had barely a minute or less before they arrived at the silent library. I am ready whenever you are. Apollo replied as he picked up a small, dusty tome from a nearby table, the weight of it surprisingly heavy in his hand. With a final nod from Felix, Apollo let go of the book and it slammed on the ground akin to a gunshot in the overwhelming silence. Noise. Who is stupid enough to make this kind of noise? Tempus Fay exclaimed in shock as he gazed at the origin of the thunderous echo. Click click. Before his teammates could react, a chilling movement disturbed the nearest shelf next to them. They slowly raised their heads without daring to make any drastic movement. With eyes engulfed in pure dread, they gazed at a hideous spider-like creature with 8 long, wooden legs that clicked and clacked against the bookshelves as it crawled. Its body was a combination of wood and paper, resembling a giant, bound tome, blending almost perfectly with its environment. The librarian is right above us, don't you dare make a single sound if you don't want to be placed on a shelf for eternity. Tempus Fay stammered telepathically, feeling like his life was no longer in his hands. His reaction was more than understandable. Based on the map's details, anyone caught by the librarian monster would have his entire being eaten and coughed out as a book. Based on the provided memories, the book would have an entire story narration from the start to the end of the victim. The worst part? The victims were trapped inside their own stories without any possibility of escaping the book. Bam! Suddenly, the library was engulfed in another booming noise, causing the librarian monster to halt its movement towards the Chronowaker's squad. It lifted its head and gazed with its crimson-red eyes at the direction of the noise. Click click. Then, it crawled from one shelf to another at a breakneck speed, heading towards the noise source. That was a close call. Tempus Fay sighed in relief while holding his agitated heart. As Chrono Walker, he rarely got scared of anything due to his ability to manipulate time. But, those monsters in the echoing tower were immune to laws. The jungle predator was just the start and all the floor guardians up next would get stronger and creepier. This meant that the only way to leave those floors was to respect each floor's conditions and rules. Captain, do we take advantage of the opportunity to search for some treasures here? One of the Chrono Walkers suggested after the librarian was no longer to be seen. I think this floor has some promising rewards. Most of those books have stories of ancient beings so as their belongings. Another one endorsed it. Make it quick and be careful with noise. Tempus Fay permitted, his eyes reflecting a hint of greed as he gazed at the thousands of books surrounding him. He understood that some of those books were relics of the tower and while it would be extremely difficult to find them through the graveyard of captured souls, if they got lucky and landed on one, they could cut their journey short. At this point, many squads desired to leave the tower after what occurred in the past floors. They knew that many things in the echoing tower made no sense, but to go against the floor's rules? That was a different story. While the few surviving squads were either rushing to the exit or searching for treasures, the librarian monster had arrived above Felix and Apollo in almost no time. Click click click. Its clicking noise was absolutely terrifying in this frightening silence, but it was nowhere as scary as the next scene. With terrifying slowness, it opened its torso, the spine of the book-like body unfolding to unveil a gruesome mouth. Rows of razor-thin teeth shone in the dimness while emanating a foul, musty odor of decay and forgotten tales. The sight was absolutely nightmarish, but Felix and Apollo held their ground. As the librarian monster overlooked above Felix and Apollo, its monstrous maw gaping wide like a black hole, a terrifying sucking force began to emanate from its depths. Whoosh! Whoosh! Loose papers, smaller books, and even a couple of unanchored chairs began to hurtle toward the mouth, threatening to swallow everything in its vicinity. In response, Felix released his sinister crimson mist, allowing it to stream towards the creature, seemingly consumed by the sucking force. Apollo, anchor us down. Felix requested after noticing that the sucking force was growing stronger each second they kept resisting it. Whoosh! Whoosh! On it! Apollo quickly conjured tendrils of darkness, solidifying them into strong, vine-like ropes that anchored them to the ground. This was enough to keep them motionless as they waited for it to get demonized. The librarian monster couldn't care less about the massive amount of crimson mist it was absorbing. All it wanted to do was consume those two invaders and turn them into books. Whoosh! Whoosh! With the sucking force reaching tenfold, even the anchored shelves began to fly into its massive frightening mouth. In less than 10 seconds, the entire area was cleared out of any piece of furniture, leaving behind only Felix and Apollo affixed on the ground akin to nails. But, soon enough, the monster's movements began to slow, its sucking force faltering as the corruptive energy started its work. Its wooden body creaked and groaned, the pages and bindings that composed its form starting to darken. "Hold on just a bit longer," Felix shouted over the noise, his voice steady despite the chaos. With a final concerted effort, Felix pushed more of the crimson energy into the monster until the demonization process finished and the connection between them was created. The moment he succeeded, he ordered it to close its mouth shut. The monster listened to his commands obediently and brought peace back to the library. "Your evil energy is truly a cheat code in the tower," Apollo remarked with a pleased tone as he stared at the new demonized version of the librarian, kneeling before Felix. Those were supposed to be invincible tower guardians that not even Unigens could do anything against them. After all, having immunity to all laws was something only Celestials had, which put those creatures at the same rank as the three rulers inside the tower. It would be a game over for anyone daring to step into the tower if it wasn't for their lack of intelligence. "Let's see if our strategy will work." Felix wasn't in the mood for empty chatter and straightaway ordered the librarian monster to devour him. The librarian monster opened its mouth widely and sucked Felix's in. This time, he didn't resist it. The moment he went inside, Felix realized that he had been transported into a different dimensional space. His eyes widened in surprise at the sight of billions of book covers in the shape of gates. Each cover was live, displaying the current ongoing scenes inside the book's story. Felix and the tenants had no words to describe their emotions as they spectated some of those stories. How does this make any sense? Without the map, it is nearly impossible to reach this floor in one piece. Even if we consider that some of those people had entered the tower while the silent library floor was the topmost floor, it shouldn't have been able to have this many stories. Thor remarked with a confused look. The question had been on Felix's mind as well as the tenants. In their eyes, there were just too many stories to add up with the time frame. But this was not the time to think too deeply about this. "What do you think? Do we hide in our world or enter someone else's?" Felix said. "Create your own, it will give you more freedom." 1758 Back home. Thought so too. Felix had the same idea. He understood that they might stay hidden in a book for a long time and that being in a familiar environment was better. Without further ado, he fed the librarian monster his desired memories to create his world and waited patiently for it to finish. A moment later, Felix was introduced to a book cover door with the chosen story of his life on the other side. A bit skeptical, Felix opened up the door and walked inside. When his eyes adjusted to the light, his expression couldn't help but soften a little. "The Sky Pearl Island, it's been a while." While walking on the sandy beach, he murmured as he gazed at the beautiful clear sky. He had chosen Sky Pearl Island as their hiding space since it was one of the few places still dear in his heart after traveling the entire universe. He used memories of when it was still deserted with a rundown hotel at its center, which was the reason it brought out those nostalgic emotions. Is this place real? Is it created out of laws? Or is it just an illusion? Lord Marduk questioned with a solemn tone, uncaring about Felix going down memory lane. It can't be an illusion, but it sounds too unrealistic to be made out of LA. Before Felix could finish his sentence, he remembered the place he was in. He swiftly turned to the ocean in front of him, and with a single finger raised, the entire ocean rose to the sky, abiding by his commands akin to a god's decree. It can't be. With a dazed expression, he lowered his finger and returned the ocean to its place. This is too freaky. Candace remarked, he can replicate everything in reality based on real laws. Doesn't this make it quite invincible inside its own dimensional pocket? A creature with control over all laws and immunity to them was the true definition of invincibility. It can't be that simple. Felix shook his head. Firstly, those laws are quantum-based laws, which means anyone with control over quantum energy can affect them. Secondly, it seems the librarian monster can't access its own dimensional pocket or any of the created stories. Still, it is quite extraordinary to have such an ability. Ramongandra noted, you can use this to your advantage. You mean to create an environment that supports my laws and denies our enemies' laws? Felix raised an eyebrow. Why not? You were planning to hide here. It's much better to establish a favorable home ground in case *T went down. Thor supported. The rest of the tenants agreed to the plan, making Felix understand that it wouldn't hurt to be prepared for the worst. But first, he had to bring everyone inside before Uranus and the others entered the library. He alerted Apollo that their plan was a success and he should go bring the others in quickly. No longer caring about making noise, Apollo took off at unprecedented speed towards the exit's location. In less than a few seconds, he spotted Commander BIA and the rest of the squad going to the next floor. He followed them in and after some time, they returned to the library on his dark cloud, which was veiled from the senses of the onlookers. Soon, they arrived at the librarian's resting place, and without an ounce of hesitation, Apollo sent the cloud toward its wide-open jaw. What the F***ck are you doing? Ah! You suicidal maniacal! Stop! Dankin and the rest of the squad were left scared shitless as they protected themselves while going inside the librarian's mouth. They weren't given even a chance to escape. Unbothered, Apollo continued on his path toward Felix's book and pulled everyone inside. The moment everyone felt the gentle and warm sunlight on Sky Pearl Island, their agitation and fear slowly dissipated. With a confused expression, they opened their eyes and gazed at the breathtaking scenery before them. Where are we? Dankin murmured in bewilderment. The birthplace of a superstar, a legend, and my dearest partner. Apollo introduced with an odd tone as he gazed around him, feeling like he was visiting a place of legends. It's not the time for your crap. Felix's eyelids twitched. Before anyone could add further to this discussion, he turned to Commander BIA and asked, were you seen heading to the exit or leaving the floor by others? Yes, we were spotted by Chaoxians and Nanites swarms. Commander BIA nodded. Good, this should aid us a little. Felix approved. He knew that Eris wasn't easily fooled, and if they didn't leave some giveaways of them leaving the floor, she might figure out their strategy. He even sent the last batch of his demonized creatures to the next floor and ordered them to hide in it. Meanwhile, Apollo switched to his sea clothes immediately and lay on the beach, gazing at the beautiful oceanic view with a wide relaxed smile. When he saw Felix offering him a cold glare, he waved his hand dismissively and said, relax, there is no path they will find us. Even if they figured us out, they will have to find a method to enter the librarian's dimension like us. Felix and the others survived the entry only because the librarian was demonized and respected Felix's orders. In reality, he imprisoned anyone inside its dimension the instant they got in. This is Eris we are dealing with. Felix replied with a stern tone, it will be too difficult to fool her twice. So, we should prepare for a battle, just in case. Prepare for a battle? What do you have in mind? Apollo raised his sunglasses in intrigue. Some time later, Eris, Uranus, and Demeter were greeted by a labyrinthine library stretched out endlessly. I can formerly smell them, Uranus said with a sinister smile as he released his senses across the floor and picked up on their fresh prey scent. Don't talk out loud, it's best not to attract the librarian to us. Demeter frowned. He must have formerly demonized it. Uranus uttered nonchalantly, but still, let me check. Before Demeter could respond, Uranus raised his hands and clapped them together in a single, powerful motion. Kaboom! The sound exploded through the library like a thunderclap. echoing off the walls and sending ripples through the shelves. The noise shattered the library's sanctity. The squads remaining behind to seek for treasures couldn't aid but freeze in shock. Someone is seeking death. Monkiar murmured to himself and restarted his search for ancient tomes, going through a book by book with his team. Meanwhile the silence was broken further by the creaking and groaning of the wooden shelves as the librarian emerged from the shadows and stood above the three Unigens. When they noticed that it was demonized, their expression turned slightly pleased. "They must be on the next 2 floors, Eris remarked confidently. She had done her own share of calculations, which helped her figure out the standardized speed of Felix's party. It wasn't hard to calculate it with all the kind of information in her possession, making her separate floors that would take them significant amounts of time to shorter times. For example, she was certain that they had struggled in the desert since it was impossible to create portals in the tower while no one could pull off the same switcheroo ability as her. "Let's get going then," Uranus said coldly, unbothered by the librarian opening its wide jaw before them. 1759 Nowhere to go. Just as it was about to start sucking them inside, the 3 Unigens had their location swapped with 3 books. Click! 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 The librarian monster chased them down, but they were way too fast for it to catch. In almost no time, they arrived at the exit and went to the next floor. Just as the librarian monster attempted to chase them through the portal, it found itself returning to the entrance of the library. The same strategy was used letter to letter, which wasn't surprising. After all, why change something that worked? The only difference this time was that their approach had screwed Felix's up. It worked. Candace was the first to celebrate with a delighted grin after she watched them leave the floor through the librarian's eyes. Some of the tenants celebrated while the majority had a stoic solemn expression. "What's wrong? Isn't this what we wanted?" Candace knitted her eyebrows in confusion. "They are too fast, way too fast." Lady Sphinx sighed, "This isn't going to end well." "What do you mean?" Candace was still puzzled. "After they travel a couple more floors and realize that there is no trace of us, Eris will be the first to figure out that we have hidden in one of the previous floors." Felix explained with a serious voice, "They will search floor by floor until they arrive at the library and find out our plan. To make matters worse, they have been trapped on the library floor after she modified the portal's destination." Lord Loki said with a deep sigh. "In other words, they are like sheep awaiting for slaughter." Lord Shiva added coldly. "Oh no. Then why the hell have you chosen this plan?" Candace covered her mouth in dread, realizing that their strategy might have hastened their damnation. Meanwhile, Felix and the others realized that the plan had slowed it after witnessing the full extent of the 3 Unigens' traveling speed. While Apollo could travel at the speed of light, not everyone could handle it, especially the quantum natives with no relation to light. If it wasn't for the 70th floor needing them to bring with them a few more members to pass it, they would have ditched everyone and traveled just them alone at their fastest possible speed. Alas, they knew that the moment they reached the 70th floor, it would be the end of the journey for them unless they made a drastic decision. Thus, they were forced to travel at a subpar speed to bring the others with them. Now, it seemed like they were about to pay the price. "Apollo, prepare for battle," Felix warned with a solemn tone, "it's about to get rough." "What do you mean?" Apollo stopped sunbathing instantly and asked, "Did our plan fail?" "It didn't, but it's about to." 2 floors below, Uranus, Eris, and Demeter could be seen floating in the middle of a reversed environment. A peaceful volcanic chain lay below them, while a raging red ocean loomed above. "Something isn't right," Eris remarked as she narrowed her eyes in focus. "Based on my calculation, we should have caught them on this floor's entrance. Maybe, there was an error and they are on a lower floor." Demeter said this even though she didn't believe it. As expected, Eris would never make such a rookie mistake. "I have already left room for error." Eris shared, "This is it." In other words, if her calculations were perfect, which was almost always the case, they should have caught them on the upper floor. Also, there is no longer any presence of demonic creatures. Uranus added coldly, I can understand them hiding their presence, but it is near impossible to hide evil energy from our senses. It turned out, the three Unigens were already familiar with Felix spying on them through his demonic creatures. They probably didn't do anything about it since it would do nothing but waste their precious time. They must be hiding in the previous floors. Eris said calmly, search this place first and let's go back. I have locked down all the previous floors, making it impossible for them to go past us. Now, we are talking. Uranus' grin turned sinister at the realization that Felix and Apollo had nowhere to go anymore. Even if they tried to escape to the topmost floors, they would be stuck there until their arrival. After an in-depth search of the past 3 floors, the three Unigens found themselves back in the silent library. As they gazed at the infinite rows of towering bookshelves, a daunting sense of annoyance washed over them. They could be hiding anywhere in this labyrinth. How the hell are we supposed to find them? Uranus cursed as he picked up a book and flipped through its pages, watching the millions of scenes of the caught victim's life. Even as a Unigen, he understood that it would take them forever to go through each book, searching for them. If they wasted millions of years doing this, it would do more good to Felix than them. After all, the whole reason he was here was to reduce the punishment sentence or get rid of it entirely. Fortunately, they can't leave the tower by enlarging their bodies and returning to the matter universe, Demeter mentioned the bright side. While Unigens could leave the quantum realm anytime they wanted by enlarging their bodies, the same couldn't be said inside the echoing tower. It was a completely sealed dimension with an overbearing authority on the same level as the universe. This meant, if the tower made it an impossibility to leave its premise through any means other than the provided ones, no one could go against it. Not even size manipulation would work, and if they dared to try it, they would look stupid with their massive sizes inside the limited space of the tower's floors. There is no reason to search every book. You just need to catch the librarian and leave the rest for me. Eris remarked calmly as she gazed at the fast-approaching librarian monster. Uranus and Demeter raised their eyebrows in surprise, but they didn't question her methods. If she said she would do something, they knew she would deliver. So, what do you mean by catching it? Demeter asked. Keep it affixed in one spot, Eris said as she sat down on the floor with her tome wide open on her lap. Then, she closed her eyes and started reading a page of the tome out loud while having her index finger pass through the sentences. As she was doing this, peculiar letters started to emerge from the tome and hover above her head. I don't know what she is up to, but let's catch the thing first. Demeter said sternly while slamming her palm on the ground, causing pillars to emerge around the librarian, which turned into a closed-shut prison. Before they could wonder if this was enough, the librarian monster smashed through the prison like it was made out of brittle rocks and continued its charge. Click! 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 With its immunity to laws, it might be a bit tough. Demeter narrowed her eyes. 1760 invading the librarian. Meanwhile, Felix, Apollo, and the rest of the tenants were watching Uranus and Demeter's desperate attempts to keep the librarian in one place. Does she really have a way to figure out your location? Lady Yggdrasil inquired softly. On paper, it shouldn't be possible. Felix narrowed his eyes at the sight of Eris being surrounded by millions of illuminating letters, but, she is commanding the laws of chaos, this is enough to make us question everything. If only it was possible to manipulate the librarian's laws as we assumed, you would be inviting them inside instead of hiding like this. Thor sighed in disappointment. Indeed, having complete control over laws implied that Felix could easily create an environment with an accelerated time difference, which would help him get rid of the chains without entering the 20th floor. However, it turned out the librarian monster could only replicate environments based on the target's memories. In Felix's case, he had no other place with a faster time difference than his current location. If he went and replicated his memories from 4 Mother Siamese's galaxy or within the ancestral dimensional pocket, he would be making things much worse. This limitation also affected him in creating a perfect home ground for them, since Felix had never visited a place where it had no chaos/order, vibration, earth, and other laws under their control. He couldn't order the librarian to remove them from the created environment when it could only replicate those memories. Thus, he opted to keep Sky Pearl Island as his desired location, knowing that even if he used an only ocean environment, Demeter would still be able to affect the ocean bed. However, he did add Apollo's domain, a 100% replica of his territory in the Eternal Kingdom, hoping to give him the possibility of using territorial pressure against their enemies. Leave it to me. Uranus grew impatient with their failed attempts and took matters into his own hands. He increased his size until he was much bigger than the librarian. Then, he phased behind the monster and crossed his massive arms around its gaping maw. To maintain his firm hold while at the same time not getting sucked inside its mouth, he used his vibration laws to change the reality around them, causing the shelves to turn into gigantic wooden arms, which held into him. Demeter provided additional support by affixing his legs to the ground. Since all of those abilities were cast on Uranus, the librarian was left to deal with Uranus' unbreakable chokehold. Eris! Get it over it quickly! Uranus pressed with an irritated expression as he kept the librarian held down in one place as she requested. Eris ignored him and extended her senses, seeking to locate the nearest living being to them. In no time, her senses locked on a member of Monkey R's squad, who was searching one book after another without a care in the world. Switch! In a single blink, the location of the squad member and a chosen book in front of her were switched. The hell! The Quarkling was left stunned by the sudden change of environment. When he saw the librarian and how Uranus, Eris, and Demeter were handling it, his stun swiftly turned into pure dread. Leader! Save me! Some peculiar strangers have caught me! He bellowed in fear while using his phasing ability to escape from Eris' clutch. Alas, Eris had no plans to let another one escape her grip. With her newfound control over his being, she pushed the floating tome's letters inside the Quarkling's mind. The letters rushed forward and began to circle the Quarkling's head in a dizzying torrent before funneling directly into his ears and eyes, penetrating his mind with relentless force. The Quarkling gasped, his body seizing the information as flooded his senses, overwhelming him with a barrage of memories and commands. After she was done, Eris pushed the overwhelmed Quarkling toward the librarian with a simple and elegant gesture inside its wide-open jaw. The librarian was no shy fella and didn't hesitate to eat the Quarkling, causing it to disappear into abyssal depths. Eris closed her eyes and linked her consciousness with the devoured Quarkling, allowing her to witness everything happening to it. Interesting, it swallows his memories and uses them to create a story before finally imprisoning him inside of it. Eris commentated with an intrigued tone after witnessing the process happen before her own eyes. Knowing that she didn't have much time, she altered her focus to what truly matters. She tapped into the stored letters within the Quarkling and brought them out in the dimensional lobby, with countless doors to other books and stories. Then, she waved her arm once and those letters flew into bullets across the dimensional space and went through those doors uninterrupted. As expected, only its exterior is immune to laws. She said indifferently. She suspected that it wouldn't be possible for the librarian to have its internal dimensional space immune to laws too. It was due to the notion that the librarian was required to devour its target's whole. If its interior was also immune to laws, the Eden people would break apart into quantum energy the moment they traveled inside of it. Eris, how is it going? Uranus frowned. Can I let go now? I am searching for them. Eris replied calmly, keep hold of it for a while. Eris was indeed searching for Felix and his party through using those letters. Each letter gone through a book was linked to her tome, which in turn was connected to her. With their infinite number, it provided her the ability to scan through millions of books in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, Felix and his tenants had seen the whole thing and were left with distressed expressions. Can't you do anything to kick her off? Thor remarked with a stern tone. It's already too late. Felix shook his head. These chaotic letters have been spread out and I can't do anything to stop them. Felix's control over the librarian was as limited as its control over itself. He could not order it to do things beyond its creation. Dealing with those chaotic flimsy letters was one of them. How about you switch your location to another book? Candace included with a concerned tone. If you conceal using your spiritual pressure and delete your world, she might not find you. In her eyes, Felix was doing Eris a favor by displaying her a familiar environment in the Eternal Kingdom. A single glance was enough to figure out their hiding spot. On paper, it sounds like the right call. Felix replied with his eyes narrowed, but it would never work against Eris. The moment she stepped inside the dimensional lobby, she had all the tools at her disposal to dig us from underneath the ground regardless of what ability used. He is right. Lilith included lazily. Those letters didn't just give her the ability to scan millions of books at once. They are her weapon, her limbs, her everything. With one word, she can turn those letters into homing missiles locked on both of them. That simple. Why isn't she doing it already? Thor raised an eyebrow in surprise. 1761 I caught you at last. Because it is considered as abusing her laws and she will suffer from a small punishment. Lilith clarified. Since she is in the echoing tower, she had no problems with receiving some of those punishments if necessity demanded it. Felix nodded. In other words, it was better to bring them to their own prepared territory than to get found in another book for the sake of a small punishment. Lady Sphinx concluded. I see. Candace started to realize that Felix wasn't the only one capable of abusing his laws to turn things to his advantage. This made her more worried and scared of what was about to come next. Ready yourselves. When Felix understood that sooner or later, Eris letters would go inside his world, he gave a stern gaze at Apollo and Commander BIA. It's the moment of the truth. Apollo cracked his knuckles while pulling out his lyre, understanding that some of them might not make out of here alive. Although they had a plan in place to handle their enemies, it was subpar at best when it came to dealing with upper celestial unigens. But, there wasn't much they could do about it. The library offered them with the biggest chance of survival compared to the previous or upcoming floors, and they had to risk it. Found you. Suddenly, Eris' eyes gleamed for a second after she spotted a familiar environment inside one of the books. Without an ounce of hesitation, she recalled the rest of the letters and sent them inside that world. The letters gathered in one place and started stacking among each other until a bright curvy stunning female figure emerged. With a sudden flash of light, the figure turned into Eris herself. The chase is over, come out, and let's end things peacefully. Eris announced indifferently as she pushed her glasses upward her nose. Although her senses hadn't picked up on anyone yet, she was certain that Felix and the rest were hiding here. That's because the librarian could not create multiple worlds using the memories of one person. In other words, if Felix wasn't hiding here and using this environment as a distraction, it would do nothing but delay the inevitable and ruin his advantage. No response? I goose. Before Eris could make another move, a sudden flash of light appeared out of nowhere, targeting her back. It was a spear of light, cutting through the peaceful atmosphere with the speed of light. Eris had sensed the surge of energy at the last possible moment and turned sharply to face the incoming threat. Without an ounce of fear, Eris met the spear with a brilliant flash of light. However, instead of the expected impact, the spear disintegrated upon contact with Eris. The particles of light from which it was formed scattered into harmless, sparkling motes that faded into the air around her. Impressive, Apollo. But you should know better than to believe a mere spear of light can unsettle me. Eris commentated calmly. Then, how about millions of them? Apollo's playful voice resounded in the sky, and before it could reach Eris' ears, she found herself surrounded by millions of blinding spears, coming from every single direction. Unfazed, Eris used the same technique to shut down the barrage of spears. She remained untouched as the spears went through her skin akin to being devoured by a black hole. The analogy wasn't far-fetched when considering that the technique used was called order cancellation. A powerful and unique technique capable of summoning the exact opposite force of the targeted attack to counter it perfectly. In this case, Eris had used it on her skin, which created a pitch-black barrier with a 100% light-absorbing effect. Thus, the rain of spears ended up doing nothing but cast a brilliant glow across the sky Pearl Island, an utterly useless attempt. At least, this was what appeared to the onlookers. But in reality... Whoosh whoosh. Eris raised her eyebrows slightly after Felix and Apollo suddenly emerged from within one of those flashes of light right before her eyes. One came from the front and the other from the back, sandwiching her in the middle. One was holding a spear made out of light while the other was carrying a black lightning bolt, crackling with fierce electric power. Both of their expressions were cold, serious, and mostly, murderous. For they understood that they were pushed into a corner and the only way forward was to go all out. Ares. Apollo thrust his spear of light forward, attempting to pierce through Eris' chest. Simultaneously, Felix, with the matching overwhelming speed, lunged forward, his lightning bolt aimed directly at Eris' back. They believed that Eris might leave a small opening in which she would be forced to either defend her front from the spear of light or her back from Felix's lightning bolt. Alas, Eris was no pushover. As the weapons neared, she invoked an advanced version of the order cancellation technique. This caused both attacks to halt the instant they touched her skin. The only difference this time was Eris' front side turned pitch black while her back transformed into a gleaming, metallic surface. The powerful electrical voltage was wholly negated by the peculiar metallic material akin to a fire being quenched by water. Damn it! She is untouchable. Felix cursed with an ugly expression as he pulled away from Eris. He was already informed that when Eris decided to take a battle seriously, it was nearly impossible to touch her, all because of this technique. A technique capable of transforming her own body into the best material or energy capable of countering their attacks. The only way around it was to utilize peculiar attacks that could not be countered, which was nearly impossible for either Felix or Apollo without abusing their laws. If Felix still had his 7 sin laws, bypassing this technique would be child's play, too bad. As she watched them create some distance from her, Eris remained unmoved, her eyes shifting forward to meet Apollo's and Felix's. Is that the extent of your creativity, gentlemen? Eris remarked calmly, no matter how powerfully wielded, simple laws cannot breach the defenses of one who commands the very principles of chaos and order. Before Felix or Apollo could react, Eris clapped her hands once, and a part of the letters that made her existence broke apart and merged to create a circular chaotic grey portal. The moment Felix and Apollo saw the portal, their expressions turned for the worse and they swiftly attempted to break it apart. Alas, the portal was protected with the same technique and their attempts failed again. Damn it, they can't even deal with Eris properly, how can they handle Uranus and Demeter too? Candace nervously watched as Uranus stepped through the portal, widening it with 2 hairy arms. His visage was as cold and merciless as ever, but this time, his eyes were mixed with a hint of sinister pleasure and thrill. I caught you at last. He uttered one by word, his eyes never leaving Felix and Apollo, they were affixed on them akin to a predator locking on his prey after a week of starvation. 1762 Has he gone mad? As he stepped over, Demeter exited through the portal with her usual stern attitude. The moment her eyes adjusted to the light, she shook her head at Felix and Apollo in disappointment. You genuinely thought there was a place in this universe where you could escape from the 3 rulers? She eyed Apollo. Apollo, I never thought you would be this naive. She didn't mention Felix as she knew that his fate was already sealed to be an eternal enemy of their kingdom and the 3 rulers. But, Apollo was different. His betrayal was idiotic and borderline suicidal in her eyes. First of all, it's not like I wanted to do this. Apollo coughed, but, you know, I have no control over the wants of my other half. It won't hurt if you tried to show some loyalty. Felix's eyelids twitched, knowing that he was asking for the impossible when it came to Unigens. Luckily, Unigens never took betrayal lightly even when their loyalty could be questioned. "Save it, your other half will be next after we deal with you," Demeter said. "Now, do you want to do this the easy way, or the hard way?" Uranus smiled diabolically as he cracked his knuckles. "Of course, you will be tortured either way." Uranus planned on doing his best to fulfill the three rulers' request of bringing Felix alive to them. However, only if his anger and hatred were fully quenched. If it wasn't, he had no problem with killing both of them even if it meant going against the three rulers' orders. His desires and wants always came first. Felix and Apollo remained silent, their eyes were narrowed in concentration, anticipating any sudden movement by their enemies. Eris, Uranus, and Demeter also kept their eyes on them without initiating a move even when they had the numbers advantage. They knew that Felix and Apollo were shrewd and would have prepared something to welcome them. Apollo's domain is thousands of kilometers away. Why haven't they turned the entire world into his domain? Demeter frowned. This little island seems like it has no business being here. She could understand Felix wanting to keep the ocean for his water laws, but still, it wouldn't be as useful as turning the entire world into Apollo's domain. After all, this would still give Felix control over lightning laws while providing Apollo a real home ground. "I don't give a sh*t. I am making my move." Uranus grew impatient immediately, no longer able to handle the sight of Felix and Apollo being so close to him without trying to put his hands on them. With deep concentration, he began to direct the immense energy of vibration into a focal point within his clenched fist. The air around it buzzed with power, visible ripples emanating from his hand as the energy condensed into a dense, vibrating core. "Let's take this outside," he said with an icy tone, desiring to shatter the entire dimensional world to pieces. Without warning, Uranus momentarily phased out, and when he reappeared before Felix and Apollo, his presence was like a sudden tempest. Apollo gave Felix a trusting glance and took a step back. Meanwhile, Felix stood his ground with an equally aggressive retaliation. Drawing from his control over vibrational energy, Felix readied his fist, mirroring Uranus' technique. "Has he gone mad?" Demeter's lips parted slightly in shock. The notion of Felix daring enough to proceed fist to fist with Uranus was crazy on its own. Yet, to challenge him with his vibrational laws? It was suicidal. "It seems like I haven't beaten sense into you yet." Uranus sneered in derision at Felix's incoming fist. It was also glowing with vibrational energy, but when compared to his fist, the difference was like the lighting of a candle to a lighthouse. Uranus didn't even bother to cancel out Felix's vibrations, desiring to teach him a grave lesson on his foolish bravery. Unfazed, Felix met him head-on. Before Uranus and the others could respond to his brazen act, a faint smirk emerged on Felix's face as he uttered, "Switch." The Sky Pearl Island space-time fabric began to warp, causing the frequencies of reality to shift unpredictably. In almost no time, the entire dimensional space turned into the silent library, with Felix's and Uranus' fists locked together near the glass ceiling. "You!" Uranus' eyes widened slightly in astonishment as he gazed deeply into Felix's eyes. He instantly recognized what Felix had done to avoid getting obliterated by his punch. He knew it before anyone else, as he had felt the space-time's frequency change a nanosecond before his clench could make contact with it. As the space-time frequency of the environment shifted, so too did the effectiveness of Uranus's vibrational punch, which relied on smashing the space-time frequency, causing massive destruction in the area. If suddenly changed or failed to land on the frequency, his thrown punch would be the same as any normal punch. Felix, having engineered this moment, didn't fall to the same fate. His original punch was targeting none other than the space-time frequency of the silent library from the get-go. Thus, under the disbelieving looks of Uranus and Demeter, Felix grunted his teeth and pushed his fist forward, aligned perfectly with the new space-time frequency. Crack! Boom! While the vibrations themselves pushed into Uranus failed to do anything to him, the impact created a massive shockwave. The shockwave exploded outward, causing the reality to start cracking akin to a glass mirror. But no one's eyes were on this. Everyone gazed with widened pupils at Uranus, who got hit with its unstoppable force, flinging him backward akin to a broken doll. Thud. 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 He crashed into the diverse bookshelves that lined the library, causing books and debris to erupt around him as he smashed through hundreds of shelves. Thud. He finally came to a halt, buried beneath piles of books and splintered wood, stunned and disoriented by the sudden reversal of fortunes. Around them, the library groaned and shuddered under the impact, cracks spreading across the stone floor and up the walls. Dust and paper filled the air, creating a haze that slowly settled over the chaotic scene. Felix stood firm, his chest heaving from exertion, his clench shaking from the aftermath, but his eyes were cold and calculating. Move out now. Not giving time for either his enemies or allies to react, Felix tapped into his librarian control and ordered it to switch the environment to Apollo's domain. This time, he didn't choose any other environment to mix with it, causing the entire world to turn into a massive sprawling city, with one side bathing in light while the other engulfed in nightmarish darkness. The moment the city came to life, Apollo disappeared into its shadows and brought Felix with him while at the same casting his territorial pressure on their enemies. Move! 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 Meanwhile, Commander BIA and her squad took off towards the silent library's exit the moment Felix kicked them off the librarian's dimensional stomach. Felix understood that escaping from the Unigens was useless if Eris kept the library's exit on lockdown. Thus, instead of having them as a burden in their battle, he tasked them with finding a way to remove the spatial modifications on the portal. Eris was the first to sense their escape, but she didn't pay any attention to them as Apollo's territorial pressure made her feel like the weight of a galaxy was placed on her shoulders. Use your divinities to cancel it. Eris uttered calmly while creating a thin golden barrier with the stored radiant divinity. 1763 This is the quantum realm, my realm. While divinities or celestial energy couldn't be linked between the matter universe and the quantum realm, it was possible to utilize the stored version. It was the same as elemental energy, their divine weapons, and other types of energies from the matter universe. Unigens could use whatever they managed to shrink with them, but could not create or have someone send more. Whoosh! After popping his radiant barrier, Uranus jumped into the air and joined his partner's side with a clear irate expression. He even brought out his divine bronze scythe, having no interest in receiving another humiliating strike. Just like Apollo's lyre, he was able to shrink his divine scythe with him, a somewhat impossible experience with other objects. Divine weapons were considered exceptions, as they were additional limbs of Unigens due to the billions of years spent together. Some projectiles even gain consciousness if they live for a prolonged period while feeding on energies. Unigens had no interest in having a consciousness born from their weapons, thus, they brought a stop to it. They were more than satisfied with just having their weapons become part of their existence. Unfortunately for Felix, he didn't share the same experience with Hephaestus' hammer and couldn't shrink it. Why are you delaying the inevitable? Uranus uttered with a suppressed tone, his murderous bloodshot eyes were moving side to side, seeking to fish out his prey. However, his senses couldn't pick up anything related to Felix or Apollo, even when he used his vibrational detection skills. They were like ghosts hiding deep within this sprawling deserted metropolis. It was understandable as this was Apollo's domain and with his control over darkness, it was near impossible to fish him out from here unless he wanted it. Let me. Fully aware of Apollo's dominance within his domain, Eris swiftly took measures to eradicate his home advantage. She sat cross-legged mid-air and opened her tome on her lap. Then, she touched the front page of her tome with 2 fingers and the letters began to jump out of the book and dance on its pages akin to obedient little elves. With a single finger snap, the letters froze and merged until they created a small chaotic sphere. When Apollo and Felix saw it from within the darkness, their expressions turned solemn immediately. Is that it? Yes, it's the sphere of absolution. We have to break through her dimensional lockdown on the library before its completion. I have them under my radar. Felix replied as he switched his focus to a wisp he planted inside Commander BIA's consciousness space. Tell them to hurry the F*CK up. Apollo said with a stern tone while gazing at the sphere of absolution growing bigger and bigger. He understood that Eris might seem omnipotent, but she had some imposed limitations on her abilities. For example, the dimensional reality, where she was considered as its creator and judge, could not go beyond a specific size. It was quite small and could even be seen as a cubic dimension with the naked eye. Still, she could cast it almost instantly, which traded off the negatives. Meanwhile, the sphere of absolution was the advanced version of the ability. It could get as big as Eris wanted it, providing her with a personal reality, where she could play goddess with even unigens. The only downside was its growing phase required time and left Eris unprotected while she focused everything on making it bigger. Apollo and Felix had no plans of watching Eris finish the creation of their graveyard in peace. Whoosh! 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 A volley of light, dark, and electrical projectiles whistled through the air in her direction, attempting to disturb her concentration since both order cancellation and sphere of absolution techniques required utmost focus. Uranus swiftly responded and stepped in front of Eris. With a single 360-degree swing of his divine SCYPTH, a powerful negating vibrational wave was released, causing projectiles to dissipate the instant they were touched by it. You do you, I will fish them out on my own. Uranus left Eris' protection to Demeter and headed down to the city, landing on a tall skyscraper that was shimmering with golden light akin to a beacon. You think only Eris can deal with your little shenanigans? Uranus narrowed his eyes coldly at the city of duality as he declared, "This is the quantum realm, my realm." Uranus instantly extended his senses beyond the physical, tapping into the deeper, subtler frequencies of the strings that composed everything within Apollo's domain. Each string vibrated with its unique signature, creating a symphony only Uranus could perceive. This realm, crafted from light and shadows, was no different at its core, just another composition of vibrational strings waiting to be played. The instant Uranus locked on every single unique frequency, he snapped his eyes open, which now glowed with a fierce, golden light. Then, he raised the scythe above his head, and with a resounding voice that boomed like thunder, Uranus issued a single command, "Collapse." Following his command, he brought the scythe down with a calculated tap against the skyscraper, targeting a random point on the roof that acted as the first piece of a chain of dominoes collapsing. The tap sent an invisible shockwave rippling through the fabric of Apollo's domain, finding every weak point and amplifying the vibrations there until the bonds that held the domain together began to unravel. The walls, the ground, the buildings, even the air, everything within Apollo's world began to tremble violently. Within moments, the entire domain was consumed by a flood of collapsing energies, which eventually turned into a whirling maelstrom of quantum energy. Once a domain of light and darkness was now just a chaotic soup of invisible quantum energy in a seemingly endless void. Is he dumb? This did nothing but help us out. Candace tilted her head in confusion. Most of the tenants shared their reaction, feeling like Uranus did nothing but show off his control over vibration laws, allowing him to disintegrate any matter created out of quantum energy back to its original form. However, as Candace mentioned, this left a vast pitch-black void for Apollo. In other words, he really didn't do anything to better their situation. Even worse, Felix can return the environment back to Apollo's domain with a single co. Before Thor could finish his sentence, his eyes widened in shock at the sight of Uranus absorbing the massive quantity of quantum energy through his divine scythe. As it kept feeding on it, the bronze scythe turned darker and more ominous. **T, the librarian can't change the environment anymore. Felix's expression turned for the worse after he ordered the librarian monster and it did nothing. It's the quantum energy. Lady Sphinx remarked, it can't create more of it and without it, this dimensional space will remain as a void. No, it can create more, just not fast enough to make a difference. Felix had anticipated many things, but he didn't think that Uranus would utterly demolish his world and seize its quantum energy in less than a second. Alas, the worst had yet to come. Apollo, change of plans. 1764 An unstoppable shockwave. Before he could finish his sentence, his eyes saw two peculiar energies emerging from the scythe, one was white and the other was black. The two energies mixed together in the shape of a circular, resembling the yin-yang symbol without the dots. At first glance, Felix and Apollo realized what those energies were, and it made their hearts sink to the bottom of their stomach. Antimatter and matter particles. Felix bellowed immediately, "We can't let him carry on. You don't have to tell me twice." Scared **+, Apollo tapped into his stored resplendent divinity and used it to empower his next attack. He manifested two massive pitch-black eyes, and with a sudden flash of light that illuminated the whole void, the eyes opened up and locked on Uranus' fleeting emergence of his shadow. Shadow possession. Uranus' shadow suddenly turned alive and tried to go through his skin. If successful, Apollo would gain temporary control over Uranus. Just like a PC, it didn't matter if it was the most protected supercomputer in the universe. Once it got corrupted by a reliable Trojan, its control switched to the Trojan's owner. With resplendent divinity used, the potential of the ability was increased by 100-fold. It should have a guaranteed success rate. Unfortunately, Uranus had locked in 100% and no longer planned on falling to their attacks. Shadow possession. He scoffed as he watched the vibrational barrier on his skin convulse his own shadow until it broke into particles. Crap, he has turned on his peak defensive technique. Apollo cursed, unless you use your 7 sins laws, none of us can land a physical attack on him anymore. All upper celestial unigens possessed peak defensive techniques that put the lower celestial unigens in despair. For Eris, it was the order cancellation technique, and for Uranus, it was resonance tuning. A powerful and complicated defensive technique that required immense concentration to keep it working. It forced Uranus to tap into the natural vibrational frequencies of his immediate environment and identify any abnormalities near him. Then, he adjusted the vibrational output to match or harmonize with these frequencies, creating a synergistic effect. The moment this occurred, Uranus was given control over the frequency of those abnormalities, and with a slight modification, its creation fell apart instantly. This whole process happened in less than a nanosecond to the shadow. The failure of Apollo's next barrage of attacks made them realize that Uranus wasn't screwing around. He refused to let anything touch him anymore. Even Felix's water/lightning attacks came back with useless results. He tried to control his internal blood, water, and electrical discharges, desiring to assault him from within. Sadly, his attempts were negated in the same manner as the defensive technique operated also internally. Nothing can go through. Candace murmured with a hint of despair. Just sit tight and accept your fate, it will be over before you know it. Uranus noted with a sinister smile as he gazed at the energies of creation and destruction finely balanced within his grasp. With ugly expressions, Felix and Apollo watched as Uranus swung his scythe at the yin-yang symbol, cutting through the mixed matter/antimatter particles in a straight line. The meeting of matter and antimatter triggered an intense reaction, causing a blinding flash of light to emerge and soon followed by a deafening boom. If this was all, the destruction would have been contained within the dimensional world, but Uranus had used his vibrational force to guide the explosion into hitting the space-time frequency. This was what Felix and Apollo feared would occur. "Stay with me!" Felix bellowed in agitation as he caught Apollo's arm from within the darkness and ordered the librarian to teleport him to another world. He knew this world was beyond saving. He wasn't overreacting at all. The immense shockwave was on another level compared to Felix's space-time vibrational punch. If compared, it would be 10,000-fold its force. Instead of the usual spatial cracks, the entire dimensional space shattered into the tiniest fragments in an instant, and continued rippling outward, tearing through the librarian from within. Felix and Apollo kept escaping from the all-devouring shockwave, but after a couple of jumps, they discovered out that the librarian's responses to Felix's calls became slower and slower. It was for a good reason, as the monster's form buckled and twisted, its wooden and bookish components disintegrating from within under the overwhelming force of the combined particles and vibrational energy. It might be immune to laws, but there was nothing it could do about such a destructive tsunami of pure force. "We have to ditch it quickly," Apollo yelled, his voice cracking from dread. He understood that nothing could protect him from a shockwave that was obliterating even the fabric of space-time. "I know." Felix also had no plans of getting caught in the explosion, but he thought far ahead and discovered out that the explosion might spread outside and delete the entire library with it. In other words, leaving the dimensional space of the librarian was not enough. Without an ounce of hesitation, Felix came up with a swift countermeasure and made a move on it, having no time to even explain it to Apollo. The moment he got himself and Apollo kicked out of the librarian, Felix rolled forward once and then extended his arm in the direction of the librarian monster in a kneeling position. The librarian's monster had cracks all over its body, each releasing a beam of blinding light, a clear sign that it was about to implode in the next second at best. Felix tapped into his evil energy connection between him and the librarian, creating a visible misty link. "Argh!" Then, Felix growled aggressively as he spun once and hurled the librarian into the nearby library's entrance. Not bothering to watch it go through the portal, Felix immediately shouted, "Apollo!" Although Felix hadn't told him anything, Apollo instantly snapped out of his daze and appeared beside Felix. With no words exchanged between them, he turned into a flash of light and took them away from the entrance at his topmost speed. The moment the librarian went through the portal, its body could no longer contain the overwhelming force. Boom! With a brilliant flash of light that illuminated the eternal staircase floor, the terror of the librarian was no more. However, it did one last favor for Felix and his companions. Its explosion was so devastating, it managed to erase the library's entrance near it. As for Eris, Uranus, and Demeter, they surfaced safely from the explosion due to Eris' sphere of absolution. She tugged them inside before the explosion went off, and even though it affected space-time, it did nothing to the sphere. Whoosh! The moment the shockwave died out, the Unigens exited the sphere of absolution and gazed at the void before them. Demeter turned to Uranus with an irritated expression. "Happy now? Couldn't you just let Eris do her thing?" Uranus didn't show an ounce of guilt. He turned to Eris and said, "It's nothing, Eris can bring back the portal again. But, it will force her to cancel her sphere of absolution." Demeter handed him a scolding look, not too delighted with him making things harder. "It's okay, Demeter. They won't be able to fix the spatial modification in time." Eris noted calmly as she cancelled her sphere of absolution and walked to the exit's location. "See, stop overreacting. I turned them into rats in a jar." Uranus smiled coldly. 1765 Abusing his laws. Meanwhile, Felix and Apollo had already arrived at the library's exit and joined their party. While they had escaped from their enemies and noticed that the entrance had fallen apart, their expressions weren't too good. "They will be here at any moment. Quickly, quickly solve it," Apollo said with a hint of agitation as he gazed at Commander BIA and their squad attempting their best to remove the spatial modification. "Rushing us isn't helpful," Plix retorted, his voice betraying his stressed condition. As a quantum native with a spatial attunement, he could be said to be the key to their escapade. Commander BIA and the others were the ones helping him figure out the solution. "You don't have to remove the modification." Felix gave him an alternative with a stern voice, "Just try to change it to a different destination. It doesn't matter what will be on the other side." "Are you sure?" Plix gulped a mouthful. "If I do this, the exit might lead to the void or to dangerous floors at the very bottom. I would rather take my chances with it than get caught," Felix said coldly while stretching his senses to the entrance area, making him spot the creation of a new portal. While no one could create portals in the tower, Eris was more than capable of recovering a pre-existing one through other laws. The only condition was it had to be done the moment the portal fell apart. Even her previous portal worked only because she created it within the dimensional world of the librarian. As you wish. Plix got busy immediately and started working on tuning the modification itself, which was much easier than removing it completely. Still, it was going to take him some time and it seemed like they didn't have it. They are here. Commander BIA felt chills course down her spine after she picked a powerful vibrational aura released from the other side of the library. Even Felix felt his heart sink a bit. He understood that their situation couldn't get any worse. Eris could easily teleport in front of them and end their dance in the blink of an eye. We need to buy us some time. But how? Felix's mind went into overdrive, his eyes roaming all over the place, seemingly digging through his brain for a solution, an idea, or anything that could help them out. Alas, his wits, his intelligence, his problem-solving talents failed him at last after a very long time. No matter how hard he tried to find a solution, his mind came back blank. We are done for. Before the defeatist energy could seize root within his soul, Apollo's voice resounded in his mind, I will hold them back, give up on your plan and get out of the tower as fast as possible. Hide in a random corner and wait until the rift opens up. Apollo, you. Felix was left stunned as he watched Apollo disappear in a flash of light. Not in his wildest dreams did he consider that Apollo would step up to protect him. While they spent their journey together and he kept referring to him as his partner, he always knew that Apollo cared mostly about his life. If a way out came up that would ensure him returning to his peaceful life without the interference of his alter ego, he would take it in a heartbeat. Felix was never bothered by this as it was the right thing to do. Don't give me those looks. My idiotic half ordered me to bring you to him at all costs. I can't afford to fail the mission. Apollo smiled wryly as he emerged before Eris, Uranus, and Demeter. At least, this way might help me return again. He mumbled the last part to himself as he readied himself for a battle. He knew for sure, he would not survive it. Apollo, is this your final decision? Demeter narrowed her eyes at the sight of Apollo bringing out his divine lyre. Apollo lifted his head slowly and gazed at them with pitch-black eyes covering his entire sclera. What choice do I have? With a heavy heart and resolute hands, he grasped the lyre high for a moment, a silent goodbye to a companion of melodies and memories, then, he snapped it cleanly in the middle. The air around him froze in time as he took the shattered lyre, its strings still humming with saddening residual music. Then, Apollo reconfigured the remaining strings, stretching them from end to end across the broken frame, transforming the instrument into a divine bow. As he grasped the bow in his hand, his body started to glow, the light within him intensifying until it became nearly blinding to behold. The brilliance emanating from him flared into a beacon, a pillar of pure, scorching light that threatened to consume the entire library. It's been a while since I have gone all out. Apollo's cold regal voice resounded deep within the blinding light. Uranus, Demeter, and Eris all felt their shoulders tense up and activated their strongest defensive techniques, knowing that when a Unigen went all out, he no longer cared about the universe's rules. In other words, they were about to witness Apollo abusing his laws. As the god of light, I hereby strip you out of your light sensories, Apollo demanded coldly while pointing his divine bow at them. Harnessing the fundamental laws of light, Apollo bent the light away from the Unigen's eyes. The effect was not just a dimming but a complete withdrawal of light from their field of vision, making them incapable of perceiving light even when there was plenty of it around them. It was like he cancelled the ability of the photoreceptors in their retina to perceive light. Bastard! Apollo, Uranus, Eris, and Demeter were not pleased to have their world turn instantly dark, devoid of any visual input. Although they could rely on other senses to see, it was nowhere as perfect as having a true vision, especially, in this scenario, when they were against the god of light/darkness. Apollo ignored their woes and pointed 3 arrows made out of dark energy at them. In a blink, he released them at once and they struck the Unigen's shields. However, Apollo's attacks never intended to target their physical bodies as the moment the arrows touched their shields, they disappeared. Whoosh! 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 When they reappeared, they turned into 3 arrows of blinding light visible to no one but the 3 Unigens. Crack crack! Before they could attempt to block the arrows, they had already landed on their soul barrier and cracked it a little. Impossible, how? Felix, who watched the whole interaction from within Apollo's consciousness space through his eyes, was departed utterly stunned. He always knew that Apollo was more oriented towards mental/soul battles, but he never expected him to have a technique that allowed him to attack the souls of his targets straight away. Unfortunately, he recognized that the cost of such an overpowering technique was the universe's punishment. It would befall Apollo sooner than later. It's not the time to be impressed. Apollo spoke coldly, I am just getting started. Knowing this, Apollo didn't waste a single second and showered his enemies with a barrage of similar dark arrows, trying to shatter their souls from within. 1766 The Starry Night Soul Explosion. With impeccable accuracy, he knocked arrow after arrow, each one designed to pierce through the toughest of spiritual defenses. As he kept releasing one wave after another, he was constantly on the move, causing his figure to turn into a blur. This made it more difficult for the 3 Unigens to predict the direction of the arrows and block them. Reinforce your barriers! Uranus shouted furiously as he entered a defensive mode. He channeled his spiritual pressure and enhanced it with a vibrational-based spiritual barricade, allowing him to create a remarkable shield for his soul barrier. Eris and Demeter had done the same in their own unique ways, providing the best possible defense for their souls. Boom! 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 The salvo of light arrows soared across the library, striking the Unigen souls' protective barriers with force enough to make them flicker and waver. The impact of each arrow sent ripples across the shields, testing the resilience of the spiritual constructs that each Unigen had summoned for protection. Unfortunately for them, their law-based defensive technique was mostly focused on the physical aspect. If it wasn't for Apollo abusing his laws and overriding their defensive shields, he would never have been able to strip their vision away and allow him access to their minds through the darkness they perceive. You think that's enough? Apollo sneered coldly as he pulled the divine bowstrings until they were about to snap, then, he turned his form into light mows and became the arrows themselves. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! Before the Unigens could react, the bow was fired, and the arrows traveled from the reality realm to the dark realm in front of the 3 Unigens, causing Apollo to manifest within their own minds. This was an invasion on a whole different level, leaving even Felix and the tenants with wide jaws, unable to react. Apollo! Don't you dare! Uranus bellowed hatefully but with a tint of dread in his voice as he gazed at Apollo turning his bow into a blinding sword with the strings merged together to make the sharpest of blades. You pushed me into this! Without an ounce of emotion in his voice, Apollo turned into a bright flash and started attacking the Unigen soul shields with deep slashes and tears at the speed of light. He was so fast, so precise, so clinical in his attacks, that the powerfully spiritual shield was left with trillions of illuminating wounds in less than a nanosecond. As the setup was completed, Apollo manifested before the soul barrier and called out loud mercilessly, "Erupt!" The trillions of wounds suddenly exploded into a flurry of light before merging into one massive sun-like explosion. The void around the barrier and the consciousness space inside of it were illuminated fully, showing an infinite space of nothingness. Before the light could die out, Apollo waved his sword to the side as he shouted, "Absorb!" The already brilliant sword went on and sucked in the explosion of light in the blink of an eye, causing it to grow 100 times bigger than Apollo. Then, he lifted it above his head while pointing at the Unigen soul barrier akin to an executioner. Is he really going to do it? This! Felix, Thor, Lady Sphinx, and the rest of the spectators were all witnessed leaning closer with pupils widened to the limit in this epic scene, a scene none of them would have ever imagined would overlap with the pervert and unreliable Apollo. Let there be light! With one final bellow, Apollo swung his massive brilliant sword down the middle of the 3 soul barriers simultaneously. Demeter, Uranus, and even Eris' expressions were turned for the worse, understanding that if this strike landed on their souls, it would be gone for real. While they wouldn't die due to their cores remaining safe, this was not good news in the slightest when a core-devouring monster was nearby. Thus, there was only one option left. Apollo. You will pay for this. Absolutely livid, Uranus tapped into the depth of his vibration laws and called upon an ability that would cost him an arm and a leg. Matter execution. Drawing deeply on his connection to the fundamental vibrations that underpin all matter, Uranus unleashed a highly dangerous ability, matter execution. This ability was not just an adjustment of vibrational frequencies to cause destruction, it was a tool to utterly erase existence at the vibrational level. The moment Uranus locked onto the frequency of Apollo, the matter execution ability was in full action, causing the strings that held Apollo together to get agitated beyond their breaking point. This made them break apart and start disintegrating at the lowest possible level. This ability could literally be used on anyone, anything, as long as they were made out of vibrational strings. Unfortunately, the foundation of reality was made out of these tiny strings, in other words, Uranus had the power of the Grim Reaper in his hands. Of course, such an unbalanced power came at a grave cost, and the universe would never allow Uranus to use it without a fitting punishment. He abused his laws too, hey. Apollo smiled bitterly after he started to feel like his existence was fading into nothingness. His form became unstable, blurring like a mirage. This caused the sword in his hand to dim and start to flicker on its path to the soul barriers. Knowing deep down that his attack, even if it landed, wouldn't cause substantial damage, Apollo murmured to Felix's wisp, "I hope this buys you a moment or two, partner." "What do you?" Before Felix could finish his sentence, Apollo went for his last, desperate strike. Gathering his remaining strength, Apollo's form began to glow with celestial radiance. Then, he released his final melody, the Starry Night Soul Explosion. This was not just a mere self-implosion. It was a sacrificial technique that would meld his soul with the cosmic energies of light and darkness. "Starry Night, unleash your boundless depths," Apollo intoned, his voice echoing softly within Felix's consciousness space. As he was about to unleash the attack, Eris, ever watchful and cunning, had anticipated Apollo's desperate act. She acted swiftly, abusing her laws as well to kick Apollo outside of their consciousness void once and for all. "Shift," Eris commanded calmly. With her command, she displaced Apollo's soul's incoming explosion from within the Unigens, redirecting its trajectory back to the library. As Apollo's soul exploded in the open air of the library, instead of the destructive shockwave expected, a unique transformation occurred. The library was enveloped in an otherworldly darkness, shadows deepening and stretching beyond their natural form. The explosion didn't just release energy, it imbued the very atmosphere with a dense, dark curse. This curse, born from the depths of Apollo's sacrificed soul, spread rapidly across the library, touching books, shelves, walls, and any person exposed without protection. Each object and person it touched was shrouded in darkness, rendering them invisible, indistinguishable to the eyes of others, as if they ceased to exist in any conventional sense. Once a bastion of knowledge, the library now became a realm of shadows and whispers. Anyone afflicted with the curse found themselves cut off from visual contact with their allies and enemies alike, isolated in a personal void of perception. "Apollo! That cunning bastard!" Uranus cursed hatefully. "He knew one of us would have abused our laws to keep him away from our souls during the explosion." Indeed, Apollo might look unreliable, playful, and a bit dumb most of the time. But his intelligence came to light when it was time to lock in. Now, with the curse marking everything and everyone, Eris would not be able to teleport them next to the exit since she had no vision of anything. Felix understood this too, which made his emotions conflicted, as it never crossed his mind to see Apollo go this far for him. Apollo, he really took himself out. "Don't get too emotional, he did this because he had to." Lilith interrupted his emotional train of thoughts. "His alter ego holds his core, which means, he controls his life. If he allows you to get captured, his life will be gone, but if he sacrificed himself and helped you reach his alter ego, he might have a chance to get revived by him. This was the reason Apollo could never go against his alter ego. His entire existence shouldn't have happened since the real Apollo was his alter ego. I am not dumb, I know all of this. But, it still doesn't change that he has gone for it. Felix said. Whether Apollo had done this for selfish reasons or not, it wouldn't lower its value in Felix's eyes at all. At the end of the day, Apollo gave it his all for his freedom throughout their entire journey, and Felix was forever indebted to him. If I survive this, I am going to make sure that he returns. Felix narrowed his eyes coldly, even if it meant going against his alter ego. That's a promise. 1767 Protect Plix at all cost. As the darkness engulfed the library, Uranus stood between his partners, his face twisted with rage. The frustration of one failure after another had taken a toll on his pride, causing his patience to reach a tipping point. *CK this. I'll tear this place apart. Uranus growled furiously as he prepared to unleash a catastrophic wave of vibrational energy that would reduce the ancient library to nothing but quivering particles. Of course, everyone on it would go through the same fate. He refused to go this far before to avoid suffering from getting crippled by the universe like Felix. But most importantly, to catch Felix and Apollo alive, desiring to put them through the worst time of their lives for everything they had done to him. But now? He no longer cared about bringing Felix alive to the three rulers or torturing him, he just wanted him dead regardless of the price. However, just as he was about to release matter execution, the darkness was suddenly pierced with a golden light. This light was magically perceivable by the Unigens even while affected by the curse. It was for a good reason. Cling! 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 From nowhere, 3 celestial golden chains materialized and lunged towards Uranus, wrapping around his wrists and waist with unbreakable strength. Their sudden appearance and the binding force of the chains interrupted his decision to obliterate everything before him. Damn you! Not you too! Uranus roared, his blood boiling in rage as he struggled against the chains that held him. The more he fought, the tighter they constricted against his flesh and soul. Nearby, Eris found herself similarly ensnared by 2 chains that had appeared around her as well, binding her arms tightly against her sides. 2 chains? Not too horrible. Unlike Uranus, her expression remained stoic, seemingly anticipating this much to happen. Both of them had abused their laws to deal with Unigens, and the universe quickly delivered its punishment. Demeter, try to stop them until we adjust to the seal, Eris said calmly, still having no intentions of letting go of Felix. With this kind of darkness, it will be annoying, but I got it. Demeter nodded with a stern tone. Without an ounce of hesitation, she melted into the floor and traveled underneath it akin to a mole, heading rapidly towards the exit point. F***CK. F***CK. F***CKKKKKKKKKKKK. Easy there, big guy. Eris gave Uranus a side glance, noticing that his outburst was getting out of control. She wouldn't care about it at other times, but now, that they were being chained up by the universe, any ounce of resistance or agitation would do nothing but tighten the chains. Cling! Cling! As expected, the chains got Uranus so tightened up, that he was on the verge of getting curled up on the ground. You have gone through this many times, whether it's a single chain or 100, do not resist, do not fight back, and most definitely, do not use your powers. Eris advised calmly, watching her peer wiggle on the ground, his eyes red to the point, they appeared demonized amidst the darkness. Telling Uranus to calm down was the same as telling an ocean to turn serene under a thunderstorm. Still, her words managed to help Uranus see the bigger picture and understand that if he let his rage take control over him, he would allow Felix to escape yet again. That was something he refused to even acknowledge. Thus, he calmed down his emotions and stopped trying to break the shackles apart. As he was calming down, the chains started to relax their grip. We have to wait until the chains disappear before we can use our powers again. Eris said as she sent her senses towards the exit, making her spot Felix and his party still working hard to break past her modifications. Uranus remained silent, but his fiery eyes affixed on the exit's direction told a different story. Although they had less than 3 chains holding them, the moment they decided to use their laws, the chains would retighten on them, causing them to feel an unholy level of agony. While the shackles had reduced their strength a decent amount compared to Felix's 99% weakening, it still affected their peak heavily. Both of them would rather wait until the shackles go away before making one last attempt against Felix instead of fighting through the torment as Lord Hades had done versus Hephaestus. "Let's hope Demeter halts their attempt," Eris remarked with a deep gaze. "What do you mean? Didn't you say it's impossible to break past your modifications?" Uranus gave her an icy glare. "It's impossible, but they might be dumb or brave enough to mess with the modifications." "What does that mean?" "The end aim will be completely random." Uranus felt his blood tension rise up again, his veins popping on his forehead. But, he contained those emotions, not wanting to ruin his efforts in dealing with the chains. Based on their dimness, it was clear that they would be gone in less than a couple of seconds. A couple of seconds, that's all Felix had before he faced off against a very pissed-off Unigen who no longer cared about his death. On the other side. "Prepare to fight. Demeter is on to us," Felix disclosed with a solemn tone after he picked on the tremors caused by the fast-approaching Demeter. "Kronos, slow down the time around the portal by 100 meters. Commander BIA ordered swiftly. "Duncan, Syrah, and the rest, help me establish a vibrational repeller." Although it was pitch dark and no one could perceive light whatsoever, no matter how minimal it was, they relied on their other senses to establish a new stronghold against Demeter. Eris and Uranus must be dealing with their chains. Lord Loki commentated, "It will be easier to deal with Demeter alone since she isn't in her environment." Indeed, Demeter was quite struggling in the quantum realm since her rules were non-existent at this level. If it wasn't for Eris helping her obtain temporal control over Earth-based quantum laws, she would be more useless than a native. Still, Felix had no plans to underestimate her, knowing that she was capable of using her divinities and whatever elemental energy she brought with her. "Here she comes!" Rumble rumble! Felix didn't even need to announce it as the ground beneath them shook akin to being struck by a catastrophic earthquake. Kronos' time-slowing abilities had worked outside of the portal's zone, slowing down the tremors immensely. However, Plix and the others at the core faced the full force of the tremors, leading Commander BIA and the remaining royal guards to defend against them at all costs. "Negate the tremors. Pacify them," Commander BIA ordered while releasing matching vibrational waves on the ground, causing the tremors to die out bit by bit. Boom! 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 Suddenly, the ground quietened down, and spikes of hardened sand erupted, aiming directly at Felix and his allies in an attempt to scatter them. But the main target was still Plix, whose mind was focused completely on the spatial puzzle left by Eris. "Defend him!" Felix yelled as he shattered the spikes with a crystallized blood hammer, going through them akin to an unstoppable train. Some were aiming at Plix and some at himself. Unfortunately, each time he broke a spike, the rubble turned into gooey sand tendrils, launching themselves again at their targets. Kronos tried his best to slow them down, but his senses weren't as great as Felix and the Vibronixians. Without his vision, he felt like he was playing whack-a-mole game, having no clue if he would slow down a spike's speed or his allies. The worst part? The Vibronixians could not bend reality through vibration when everything was affected by the curse of darkness. 1768 If I die, no one deserves to live. Keep shielding him up. Felix commanded while sparing some of his blood to create a protective barrier on Plix. It managed to block some of the attacks going through their formation as it was nearly impossible to predict Demeter's attacks. A small sandstorm grew into a violent storm of rocks, smashing against barriers. Just when it died out, a sinkhole appeared with a massive outstretched hand coming out of it, attempting to pull down Plix. They also managed to stop it, but these were mere examples of the never-ending barrage of unexpected attacks. Hell, some mercenaries had already perished, leaving behind them agonizing screams, which made the rest more nervous than ever. Who could blame them? They had no idea how they perished. It will be easier without the darkness curse, but if it wasn't for it, Eris and Uranus would have already appeared here. Lord Marduk remarked with a solemn tone as he listened to the ongoing chaos. SHT, 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 I don't wanna die, not like this, SHT, come on, I can do it. Meanwhile, Plix had completely given up on his protection and placed it in the hands of his allies, focusing solely on the exit. Plix, what the hell is taking you so long? Dankin cursed impatiently while blasting a vibrational wave at an incoming boulder. Shut up and let me focus. It's not easy. That BTCH has somehow made knots out of effing the spatial fluctuations, it's nuts. Plix cursed back, his hands moving in complex patterns that altered the portal's spatial fluctuations. When a portal tapped into the fabric of space-time to create a pathway between 2 points, it relied on the stability and consistency of spatial properties to maintain a fixed destination. What Eris had done was alter those fluctuations to a predetermined destination, leading to a different location that aligned with the new spatial configuration influenced by these fluctuations. If this was it, Plix wouldn't have been sweating this hard as he could easily restore the fluctuations to their previous state and solve the problem. Eris was too smart to let her work get easily undone. She used her chaotic laws to make knots out of those fluctuations without jeopardizing the result, which was harder than it sounded. Right now, Plix was trying his best to open up those knots while keeping the portal stable, knowing that a single mistake might result in the portal breaking apart. On the other side of the coin, Demeter gathered her strength for another assault. With a forceful stomp, she caused the very tiles of the floor to break out, transforming into a wave of jagged rocks that rolled toward the group like a miniature landslide. Brace! Commander BIA shouted, reinforcing the vibrational shield as the rocky wave crashed against it. Felix, seeing the strain on their defenses, knew they needed a change of plans. Protect yourselves! Without an ounce of hesitation, he slapped his hand on the ground and released a wave of crimson evil energy around the portal. The evil energy spread across the ground, the destroyed bookshelves, the books, and whatever else was in its vicinity. Tisk, what an irritating energy! Demeter frowned in displeasure from the depths of the library after sensing her control over the ground waning bit by bit. Still, she wasn't too fazed. I guess I am left with no other option. With a deep breath, Demeter called upon the elemental energy she brought with her into the realm. Then, she infused it with resplendent energy and released it into the surface as a massive powerful golden sandstorm. As she unleashed the storm, it roared to life with a sound like 1,000 blades, swirling around Felix and his party. Felix realized the true terror of the sandstorm after sensing its origin to be elemental energy, making him shout again, "Defend yourselves!" Everyone used their strongest shields, but the empowered sand grains sliced through their defenses like countless tiny swords, each grain cutting with the force of a well-aimed strike. The team faltered under the onslaught, some had their clothes and skin scored with countless cuts while some were barely affected. They were Kronos and Felix. Kronos used his temporal abilities on himself while Felix tapped at last into the reserve of his celestial flames. He covered himself and Plix in white flames while making sure that it wouldn't touch him. As for Commander BIA, she was able to take care of herself. Alas, the sandstorm was a mere distraction. Whoosh! While everyone was fighting for their lives against the divine sandstorm in pitch darkness, Demeter manifested from the sand particles right behind Plix, bypassing everyone's senses. Everyone, but one. Demeter. Felix swiftly manifested a sword out of his celestial white flames and slashed it at Demeter's back. Demeter felt the incoming danger, but she was already prepared against such retaliation, protecting herself with a barrier of radiant divinity. While she knew that it wouldn't be able to protect her fully from the celestial flames, she didn't care, understanding that she wouldn't die from it. At this moment, it was enough. Your time has come. Without bothering to glance in Felix's direction, Demeter punched a hole through Plix's back with a fist infused with every ounce of divinity she brought with her. The white flame shield was powerful, but Felix didn't invest much in it, desiring to save up the bits of celestial energy within him for later. On one side, we have someone who went all in, and on the other, we have Felix, deciding to be stingy with his celestial energy at such a key moment. The results were clear. Gazing at the divine fist piercing through his chest, Plix's brain short-circuited momentarily. His unbreakable focus on solving the spatial puzzle shattered in an instant at the realization that his life was over. Slowly, he turned his head to gaze at his assailant, just to witness Demeter getting smashed in the back by a blinding white sword in this infinite pool of darkness. Yet, he ignored them. When his unfocused eyes landed on Kronos, the only one surviving in his mercenary squad, a tint of regret registered in his eyes. Why have I joined this mission? Before his regret could settle in his mind, his eyes landed on Commander Bia, who was trying her best to survive the sandstorm. It's her fault. If she didn't hide the truth from us, we wouldn't have joined this suicidal mission. A maddening fury was ignited in Plix's eyes as memories of his squad surfaced in his mind, showing him all the good times they had, all the adventures they went through for millions of years if not more. All of that was stolen by Commander Bia. It's her fault. With the last bit of life he had in him, Plix swung his hand through the spatial fluctuation, which had half of them still knotted up. His hand cut through them akin to a blade in one wave. If I die, no one deserves to live after this. This was the last thought that coursed through his mind as he watched the spatial variations within the portal get agitated from the touch region and disperse out across the entire portal. Before anyone could react or comprehend what happened, the gateway suddenly devoured Plix, Felix, and Demeter in the blink of an eye. 1769 Don't forsake me. Whoosh! Then, it exploded into a gaping spatial hole with the sucking power of a black hole, dragging within it everything and anything in sight. Nuhuhu! Dankin screamed with a mortified expression as his entire body got snatched by the portal before he could use his phasing ability. The same fate happened to Commander Bia and Sira, merging with the chaos of books, rubble, and wood, until only their dreadful eyes were seen. Whoosh! Whoosh! Ah! No! What the hell is this? Meanwhile, Tempus Vey, Virona, and the other squads spread out in the library weren't spared either. The portal's sucking power was immense to the point the library's walls and glass ceiling started coming off and rushing to join the massive queue of rubble. However, some of those squads had enough time to use their abilities and save themselves. While they could see absolutely nothing, none of them wanted to meet what was pulling them. The Chrono Walkers froze themselves in time. The Quarkling's existence was correspondent to the light source. Thus, the moment they were hit with the darkness curse, their entire existence ceased to exist. The Nanites' swarm ended up breaking into their wasp-like forms due to the pressure and got caught by the flying mess. Their parasitic leader was the only one who survived the pulling force. He was still operating the plankton's body, giving him spatial powers. Unfortunately, he couldn't save his people. As for Chaoxians, they had already ditched the library and were still running for their lives, wanting to avoid Eris at all costs. Speaking about Eris, her chains disappeared the moment the portal went rogue. While the others avoided the pulling force, Eris blinked above it and extended her arm in its direction. Then, she commanded calmly, "Order restoration." The moment the words left her mouth, the same celestial chains emerged and tightened their grip on her waist until her curves showed. Uncaring about the hellish pain assaulting her mind and body, Eris watched the broken portal regain its equilibrium. The all-consuming pulling force disappeared in the blink of an eye, causing everything and everyone to escape from its monstrous gravitational pull. Thud! 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 The rubble fell down to the ground with a heavy noise, creating a massive dust cloud across the library. It's over. We are saved. I wanna go home, Sob, sob, I didn't sign for any of this. The rescued squads kept looking right and left after landing on the ground, their eyes failing to see anything around them. One thing was for certain though, everyone was absolutely scared **. They were just searching for treasures before a fighting noise broke out and was followed by eternal darkness. Just when they thought that was it, they almost got snatched into the back room. It was even more saddening to realize that despite having a map, their journey across the tower was still not safe. In fact, it was more dangerous than their last attempts. Uranus ignored the cries of the trapped natives and grouped up with Eris near the portal. When he saw her form tangled in chains again, he couldn't help but check on her first. You good? He knew that if she hadn't done it, the portal would have been destroyed with the floor. They would have needed to wait days to months again until everything got restored to normal by the tower. It's manageable, Eris replied calmly, but the little wrinkle between her eyebrows told a different story. Now, can you *King tell me how did this happen? Uranus returned to his pissed-off persona in an instant. Didn't you see? Eris responded, the little plankton has decided to kill everyone with him by destroying the spatial fluctuation, making the portal extremely unstable. How the hell can you be so calm? Uranus smashed a nearby boulder into smithereens. Going through an unstable portal in the tower is nothing short but a death sentence. While Uranus wanted Felix dead and couldn't really care much about Demeter's well-being, this news still enraged him. His reaction was understandable when considering that Felix possessed a SNES core with a bunch of other Unigen cores. He wanted him dead, but also to complete the main mission and retrieve a SNES core. After all, without a SNES core, he could forget about his freedom. I have managed to restore order to the portal amidst their journey. Eris remarked calmly, it might have helped them get thrown to other floors. Upon hearing this, Uranus' anger was pacified a bit. He thought that Eris rushed in to save the floor from a reset, but in reality, she sought to save Felix and Demeter from getting thrown into the void. In this case, the void mentioned was in the tower instead of the known void in the quantum realm. There wasn't just one void, there were many of them spread out across the entire tower, each possessing their own floor. Some had theorized that those voids were utilized to have thriving unique floors too, but they were erased by the tower for some reason. Whatever it was, there were no exits or even entrances to it. The moment someone entered it, they were proclaimed dead since portal creation was impossible under the tower's authority. Not even Felix or Demeter could escape it easily since they would not be able to enlarge themselves and return to the matter universe. There is only one way to find out if I succeeded or not. Eris gave a slight head nod at Uranus and he understood what she meant. Without further ado, he reached out to the dormant wisp of consciousness in Demeter's mind and activated it. Eris had done the same, allowing them to manifest in Demeter's consciousness space. The moment they gazed above their heads, their expressions turned for the worse at the sight of Demeter and Felix at a standoff in an infinite expanse of nothingness. It turned out, Eris' attempt to help them stay on the light side of the tower possessed failed. They were thrown both to the same void. How did this happen? Uranus murmured, not feeling too good about this. If it was him against Felix, he would have rejoiced. But, it was Demeter. She barely had 10% of her true powers in the quantum realm. She had even wasted most of her divinities to break past Felix's white shield on Plix. While Felix's strength was no better, he possessed something that every Unigen dreaded, the devouring monster of a SNES core. He must have attached himself to her during their spatial journey, Eris replied. This was exactly what happened as the moment Felix sensed his soul being snatched by the portal, he utilized the celestial white flames of his sword to remain attached to Demeter. In simpler terms, he didn't pull out his sword from her back. Guys, I need you to get me out of here. Demeter beseeched, her usual composure and sternness was nowhere to be seen. No one could blame her. Felix was gazing at her akin to a free meal while holding onto a blood hammer in one hand and a blood axe in the other. This wasn't all, his old appearance possessed returned. His hair shifted from vibrant luminous green to a wavy crimson, flowing like liquid blood around his shoulders and down his back. His eyes, once a pupil less green, now burned a deep, fiery red, their gaze intense and demonic. But it was his chest that drew immediate attention as it was adorned with intricate tattoos representing the 7 deadly sins, each mark pulsing with intense evil energy. "Come out!" With one cold command, the 7 deadly dragonic tails emerged out of the tattoos with resounding roars, seemingly rejoicing in their freedom at last. The moment they were done, their piercing bestial eyes locked onto Demeter, adding another wave of apprehension to her heart. To be trapped with a Unigen was one thing. To be trapped with the paragon of sins was another. But to be trapped with the paragon who possessed the capability to devour cores and extinguish a Unigen's life once and for all? How could Demeter's heart not be restless? How could she not feel like she was trapped with the Grim Reaper? How could she not beg for help? "Eris, don't forsake me, I implore you." Demeter pleaded again as she steeled her emotions and entered a battle stance, planning to put everything on the line for her life. She knew that if there was one person capable of rescuing her from the void, it was Eris. Alas! Felix was also planning to do the same for a simple reason. "You are my ticket out of here," he uttered emotionlessly as he placed his axe on his shoulder. "Start praying, because you ain't surviving this." 1770 I can't see a way out for her. "Let's see how the earth fares in void," Felix snarled, his red eyes blazing. Without an ounce of hesitation, he lunged towards Demeter with both weapons pulled behind him. Demeter knew that she could no longer hold anything back as she sensed Felix's murderous intent, making her understand that he sought after her core. As he closed the distance, she extended her hand, finally summoning her divine weapon. From within, a breathtaking massive lance appeared. Its slender, silver form gleamed with an ethereal light in this infinite darkness. It had intricate engravings running along its long length. Unfazed, Felix swung his blood axe down in a powerful arc, aiming to cleave Demeter in two. Simultaneously, he raised the blood hammer, preparing to strike with overwhelming force. But Demeter was no pushover. She tightened her grasp on her divine lance and in one motion, she thrust it forward at Felix's chest, ignoring his attacks. The moment Felix's weapons were able to slash at her, she bellowed, "Release!" The lance opened up into an umbrella and released a powerful forceful shockwave around it, which landed on Felix and his weapons. Boom boom! The shockwave shattered Felix's weapons into crimson droplets in an instant while his momentum faltered at once. Before he could react, Demeter closed its lance and redirected its tip towards his forehead, going for the insta-kill. Whoosh! Unfazed, Felix phased out of existence after the lance was a mere inch from his forehead, causing it to go through him unhindered. Then, he swiftly moved his head to the side and turned back his body's vibrations to the same plane, making it seem like he blinked back to existence. "You thought I haven't done my research on you?" Felix uttered coldly as he caught the lance from the middle. Felix was already informed about many details related to Demeter, from her strengths, weaknesses, divine weapon, fighting style, and more. In the case of her divine weapon, it was a unique piece of equipment in its own right. While Apollo's lyre/bow specialized in mental battles, Hephaestus' divine hammer in destruction, Demeter's lance was an all-rounder weapon. It could open up and be used as a shield or remain closed and serve its original purpose. Yet, its most unique aspect was its ability to absorb force through its tip and release it as a shockwave or whatever Demeter decided. However, one of its weaknesses was its superconductivity to electricity. Thus, just as Demeter was about to pull it away, Felix's hand shimmered with electrical discharges, causing his hand to remain affixed to the metallic surface of the weapon. This wasn't all, as the electricity coursed through the weapon into Demeter's body, it forced her to keep her hands on it. The moment Felix got linked directly to Demeter's electrical signals, he sent a system shutdown command, desiring to turn off her brain. While he could only utilize the electrical discharges his body manifested naturally, he was forced to improvise and come up with ways to make use of them. Unfortunately, Demeter was always prepared for Felix's lightning-based laws the moment she found out about them. Thus, before the electrical command could take hold of her, she doubled down on her control over her mind, seemingly taking manual control. This made her negate the command easily by overriding it manually. Normal humans could not imagine such a thing, as it was impossible for them to control the tasks of a single organ. Tisk. Felix wasn't too disappointed by his failure, as he was already anticipating it. Instead, he geared for the next assault. Roar! 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 The 7 dragonic heads moved in an instant with jaws wide open at Demeter, attempting to bite massive chunks off her hardened skin. Demeter's eyes turned solemn as she transformed her skin into the hardest known surface in the universe. She might not be able to control quantum energy, and her elemental energy was limited after shrinking it with her. She could still control her own body. Cling! 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 Upon impact, the dragonic head's sharp teeth failed to leave a single trace of her flesh, biting her with everything they had, but to no avail. It was like they were biting into an unbreakable piece of material. Just as Felix wanted to double down on his offense, Demeter broke past the electrical discharge forcefully and let go of her weapon. Then, with a cold gaze, she ordered, "Mountain's Wrath." The divine lance opened up slightly to make a mountain's peak, causing Felix to let go quickly. However, he was still a tad bit late. Whoosh! Whoosh! The lance spun on its axis and released thousands of shape blades in every possible direction. If Felix tried to phase out again, he knew that his entry point would get him hurt beyond measure. Unlike Uranus or other veteran vibration controllers, he wasn't able to maintain his phasing for more than an instant. Dragonic armor. The 7 dragonic tails attached themselves to Felix, causing his body to be wrapped by vibrant and colorful scales, each embedded with a dragonic eye. This was the same armor he used against the third ruler, Amonare, providing him with unparalleled protection and a sensory network that extended beyond the physical. Cling cling cling. It might not be as great as the last time he used it due to the massive difference in strength, but still, the emergence of the dragonic armor helped Felix block and avoid the rain of divine blades. As he was under its assault, Demeter took a step back and extended her arm at him. Her eyes never left Felix's face. "I just need to keep you away until Eris finds me. Then, it's a game over for you." The moment the words left her lips, her extended arm turned into a pitch-black lance manifested out of sand grains. She empowered it with the bits of resplendent divinity in her possession. Without hesitation, she threw the lance in Felix's direction, knowing that it would be extremely difficult for him to avoid it in his current condition. "That's it, Demeter, you have him." Uranus' eyes lit up at the sight of Demeter pressuring Felix. Alas, before his confidence in Demeter's chances to defeat Felix could rise, Felix shattered it with a single move. Celestial Blood Wall. An illuminating dark red shield manifested in front of the flying dark lance and blocked its advances in an instant. The overbearing spear blew into fragments even when it was enhanced by resplendent divinity. *T, he is using his celestial energy to enhance his abilities. Demeter's expression turned slightly for the worse. How much does he still have? What terrified her the most was Felix's pool of celestial energy, as she had no clue how much he brought with him. While she understood that the same amount he had on the surface didn't represent what he brought with him, still, in this kind of battle, where both parties were heavily limited, some celestial energy was enough to turn the table around. "Eris, don't take too long." Demeter sought reassurance but got nothing besides silence. Eris kept spectating their battle without much of an expression. Demeter was a bit scared by her silence, but all she could do was focus on blocking Felix's attempts to get a hold of her. "Be honest, can you get to her?" Uranus narrowed his eyes at Eris. He refrained from saying anything before, since he expected Eris to have a plan in mind as always, but her peculiar silence gave birth to some doubts. "I can't see it." Eris paused. "I can't see a way out for her." "Are you messing with me?" Uranus' expression turned cold instantly. How can you not find a way to enter their void? Isn't your job to turn the impossible into possible? Not when my powers are sealed. Eris shook her head. The only way to rescue her is to analyze the whole data of the portal's previous exits. Since we don't see the other members of the Paragon's squad in the void, it means that they got thrown somewhere random too. This will add more locations to search. If I had my complete strength and no chains to bother with, I could find out the locations and modify the portal to take us to them one by one. Given there is a relay point on the other side. But now, the pain will affect my focus for such an intricate process. Just like Plix, Eris had to be careful when dealing with spatial fluctuation since one mistake might cause the portal to collapse. While she had no issues pulling it off before, the celestial chains would make it nearly impossible to use any ability that required intense focus. What do you mean? Tell it to me straight. Uranus knitted his eyebrows. Eris blinked once and without an ounce of emotions in her tone, she uttered, "We are spectating Demeter's death." Uranus knew that it turned coming, but it yet didn't feel good. It wasn't like he cared about Demeter's well-being. He merely understood that if Demeter died, Felix would obtain her core and they would forfeit their track completely. He had no further patience for additional chase. 1771 The Indomitable Will of a Mountain. Demeter, no one is coming to save you. Uranus uttered coldly, you better put your heart and soul into this fight. Upon hearing this, Demeter felt her heart sink to the bottom of her stomach, almost messing with her defenses. Cling! With another close confrontation, she pulled away from Felix and yelled in her mind, Eris! What does he mean? The only way to save you is for us to reach the clockwork tower and get rid of our chains. Then, return to the library and modify the portal to the destination registered and connected to it. Eris replied honestly, all of this will take a decent amount of time. Time? I don't think you have, since you need to stay alive so I can use my wisp as a connection point to open up the portal. If Demeter was thrown on a different floor with a single portal in it, Eris would need only the location's details and she could modify any portal to reach her. But, in a void, where not a single ounce of spatial disturbance appeared, it was way more complicated. Even if she knew about the void's location and had a portal near her, if there was nothing inside the void that could link up with the portal, it wouldn't work. That's why she needed her wisp to remain alive, as with her chaos laws, she could turn it into a portal, bypassing the tower's rules. After all, she was turning herself into a spatial portal instead of opening one. It was the same as teleportation and phasing abilities being allowed in the tower, but no portaling abilities. It can't be. When Demeter came to this realization, all she could do was bite her lips hard, knowing that Eris had no reason to wish for her death. Thus, if she uttered this was the only way, she truly meant it. This made Demeter understand that she could no longer put her faith in Eris and Uranus to save her. I need to save myself. Demeter's gaze got colder. I am the mighty goddess of earth, the unyielding ruler of mountains. The existence of all life depends on me. How can I succumb in this unknown piece of void? I refuse it. With one desperate bellow and eyes ablaze with determination, Demeter doubled down on her attacks, throwing everything in her possession at Felix. What the hell? Felix was caught slightly off guard by Demeter's sudden change in attitude. Just earlier, she was seeking to slow down the fight and buy time for herself. In the blink of an eye, she became a glorious goddess wielding her divine lance to its absolute limitation, giving Felix a hellish time, avoiding and blocking her attacks. Thud. 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 Has she gone mad? Thor commentated with widened eyes in confusion. I also don't know. Fenrir frowned. She might be putting Felix into a difficult time, but he can survive it. In the end, she will waste everything she has and give him the chance to devour her core quite easily. The rest agreed with his assessment as they watched Demeter go absolutely barbaric on Felix, trading blow after another, creating a rare epic and impactful battle scene between two Unigens. Something changed. Felix remarked while ducking his head to avoid Demeter's arm that turned into a green sand chain. For her to act like this, it's clear that her partners have given up on her and made her understand it. Felix narrowed his eyes, in other words, they failed to find a way to enter the void. **T, this means she will. Before Felix finished his thought, Demeter's voice rang out, resonating through the void, by the laws of earth and stone, I command you to petrify. Damn it! Felix's expression turned for the worse after noticing his dragonic armored feet starting to petrify into stone. He swiftly released his evil energy on it, desiring to corrupt and slow down the petrification. Alas, his evil energy was way too inefficient, making him understand that he would be turned into a statue entirely if he didn't change his approach. Celestial black flames. Devour it! The tattoos on his chest glowed fiercely, igniting with black celestial flames before bursting forth and covering his entire body. The flames surged forth, dancing across his body, fighting back against the creeping stone. Arg! Meanwhile, Demeter felt a sudden surge of pain ripple through her extended arm. Glancing down, she saw a celestial golden chain appear out of nowhere and coil around her wrist, its links biting into her flesh. Gritting her teeth, she turned her attention back to Felix, focusing her willpower on the petrification command. But more chains appeared, slithering from the darkness like serpents, wrapping around Demeter's arms, legs, and torso. Erg! I ain't letting go. Each link dug into her skin, sparks of pain shooting through her body, but she refused to relent. She wasn't too surprised by the chain's quick emergence as her attack was geared to petrify a Unigen's existence into a stone. This was her final and most powerful attack that could take down any Unigen if they weren't equipped with enough celestial energy to block it. Since she was literally abusing her laws to get rid of a peer, the universe would not stay silent. Meanwhile, Felix was still struggling to stop the petrification with his black flames. While it proved useful opposing it, it merely slowed it down. Demeter's command was an order to the laws of the universe, an order that could be stopped by only the universe or those sharing equal authority with it. In this case, it was Demeter herself as the goddess of earth and stone. Even when her body was racked with pain, her energy waning rapidly, her breath coming in as ragged grasps due to the chains tightening around her, she still refused to stop the petrification. I will not let you prevail. I will be saved. If I fell in slumber, I will be saved. She growled, her voice tinged with desperation. The only thing keeping her sane was the sight of Felix's body continuing to get encased in stone even with his celestial black flames roaring furiously to consume it. She knew that if she fell into slumber while Felix was petrified, Eris Wisp would remain alive and she could carry with her help regardless of how much time it needed. It was her last desperate Hail Mary. Right now, Felix's vision was narrowing as his head was half encased, leaving behind only his right eye and the upper top. Felix gave up on the rest of his body and summoned whatever he had of celestial black flames on the upper side, making it burn the edges of the stoning process around it furiously. As he gazed murderously and with a bit of dread at Demeter, who was shackled by more than 18 chains now, he couldn't help but roar telepathically, Demeter. Demeter's consciousness was already on the verge of slipping away, his scream sounded akin to a faint sea wave over the distance. I can do it. Cling! 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 More chains were added, some even pierced right through her, seemingly telling her that the universe was getting angrier at her resistance. Cough, I can do it. Cling! Cling, PSSS! PSSS! As more chains kept piercing through her body, her grip on the petrification command slipped, and she felt the weight of exhaustion pulling her down. With the divine light of the chains around her, she managed to see Felix's condition even with a blurry vision. What came into her vision was Felix's unyielding bloodshot eye, burning with a pillar of black flames, reaching hundreds of meters above him. It was the last thing not encased in stone. PSSSS. With a final chain piercing through her chest, Demeter's body went limp, the chains pulling her down and tightening their grasp. Her eyes fluttered shut, her consciousness slumping into the darkness as the universe's will forced her into a deep slumber. She wasn't fighting opposing Felix's will but against the will of the universe. Meanwhile, Felix was still encased in stone, his burning eye was the only thing keeping him alive. As he gazed at Demeter's floating chained-up body, he couldn't help but feel dread and a bit of awe at the number of chains shackling her. 28 celestial chains, how can someone have such a strong will to fight off opposing the pain of this many chains? Candace murmured in awe, not forgetting how Felix almost got ended by 12 chains. While both situations were vastly different, she still took double the number while awake. That is the indomitable will of a mountain. Lilith remarked calmly, gaze at it, revere it, for none of you can fathom what she has just gone through. 1772 The Clockwork Tower. The indomitable will of a mountain. Felix murmured as he floated slowly towards Demeter. He was still petrified in stone, but he no longer needed to keep wasting his black flames on his eye after the process ended. Understanding that Uranus and Eris must have left wisps within Demeter's mind made him prioritize getting rid of them. When he reached Demeter's chained-up body, he gave her one last look and immediately commanded a Snizkor to start the devouring process. Paragon! Hold it right there! Uranus shouted telepathically with a heated tone. To see one of his companions get devoured right before his eyes was a reflection of his own failure. It didn't sit well with him at all. Alas, Felix had no reason to care about his emotions. Make me! Felix mocked him with a faint snicker as he watched a Snizkor merge with Demeter's core. Before Uranus or Eris could say anything, the process was instantly finalized. Without a Unigen to resist a Snizkor, Unigen's core seemed more welcoming to the consideration of becoming one with it. After the process finished, Felix was given the authority to shut down her consciousness for eternity. Instead, he brought his eye closer to Demeter's face until it was the only thing shown in her consciousness space's sky. Just like an ominous blood moon cast above their heads, Eris and Uranus bathed under the crimson light of Felix's eye. Don't leave the tower! Felix declared with an emotionless tone, you're next in line. His threatening deep voice resounded once in the Demeter's consciousness space before everything came crashing down on Eris and Uranus. Rumble rumble! The consciousness ocean went rogue while the soul barrier cracked and started falling apart above their heads. Yet, none of them moved an inch, they kept staring at Felix's retreating massive crimson eye, each having multiple thoughts coursing their minds. I will do everything in my power to kill you, even if it's the last thing I do in this existence. Enjoy your peace while it lasts, Paragon. Uranus said, narrowing his bloodshot eyes. Time and time again, you prove that I have made the right decision. Meanwhile, Eris cracked a faint smile for a moment before her expression turned carefree again. Maybe, you are the one to find the truth out of the university. Before she could finish her sentence, the soul barrier collapsed at once, causing the consciousness ocean to wash them away. Demeter had died for the first and the last time. 1 month later, the echoing tower was engulfed in a sea of serenity at last after the last surviving squad had made out in one piece. It was none other than the squad of chrono walkers. The Chaoxians managed to escape as none of them were caught up in the Unigen drama, which allowed them to jump inside the first exit point in sight. The Chronowalkers' leader Tempus Vey turned his head to glance at the tower one last time. Map or no map, I am never stepping here again, never. He gulped a mouthful and flew into the distance with his squad behind him, seemingly running from the worst possible experience in their lives. Luckily for them, the curse of darkness wasn't permanent, otherwise, they would have been turned blind for eternity as there was no one capable of removing it besides its owner. Meanwhile, the rest of the squads either ended up perishing on a lower floor or got caught by Eris and Uranus. The 70th floor was a place of sacrifice, which had only one condition to pass it: each wanderer needed to sacrifice one intelligent life form to continue his descent. Thus, they kidnapped 2 natives with them and used them as a sacrifice to pass the 70th floor. From then on, it was a smooth journey to the 20th floor. They chose this floor for the same reason Felix was gunning for it, helping them speed up their punishment. Since Uranus had 3 chains and Eris 2, it implied that he had 3 million years to serve while she had 2 million, a relatively short duration for Unigens. Right now, they were entering a massive clockwork tower that resembled the Big Ben in London. The clock on the tower had peculiar hands. Usually, there was an hour hand, a minute hand, and a second hand for a standard clock, but here, there were 9 hands. What a mysterious place! Eris expressed intrigue as she roamed inside the clockwork tower. There was nothing in it but cogs, and small rooms with miniature clocks on the doors. If the map's details are correct, then, we can take a room each and speed up the time to our decided target, Uranus replied calmly. It's too risky, don't forget about the clockworks engineer. Eris shook her head, we can't get caught inside the rooms at the same time. Otherwise, he will disrupt with the chosen period and we will have no idea about it. The clockwork tower wasn't without any dangers. On this floor, everyone could enter and leave the clockwork tower without limitations or conditions. They were also allowed to manipulate time to their advantage in one of those rooms. The only problem was the clockwork tower's engineer. No one knew about the time of his maintenance shifts and the map didn't mention it either. If he clocked in his shift, he would go through room by room and either reset the miniature clocks on the room's doors or change the time of the massive clock. In both case scenarios, if Eris and Uranus were caught in the temporal shift, they wouldn't even feel it inside their rooms. There was no need to explain why that would suck for them. Even if one of us stayed behind, we can't do anything to stop him. Uranus responded calmly, he isn't just immune to all laws, he is also moving through the fabric of time alone, making it near impossible to catch him. With Law's immunity and movement through the fabric of time, even Eris would be hopeless against him, especially, now that her powers were sealed. Still, I prefer if one of us guarded the door. Eris replied, we can alert each other and leave before we get caught in a temporal whirlpool. I guess that works. Uranus wasn't in the mood for needless arguments and agreed at once. Ever since their failure to capture Felix on the silent library floor, his mood was always in the gutter. While they had eliminated Apollo and had his ex-wife thrown into the unknown, he didn't feel victorious at all. He already knew that Light Apollo had no core in him, which was the reason that pushed him to abuse his laws in the first place. If he had his core and was genuinely gunning to kill him through matter execution, the universe wouldn't have been too lenient with its punishment. He would have gotten 20 chains and just like Demeter. As for his ex-wife? She was nothing but a bug that needed to be crushed to teach her a lesson for standing up against him. Felix, only Felix mattered in his eyes, and his failure to catch him multiple times would never set well in his heart. After you regain your power, is there any way to catch him in the void? Uranus inquired with a sinister tone, in his current form, he will be akin to a lamb to the slaughter. Unfortunately, no. Eris shook her head before gazing through a glass window, the only way for him to leave the void is to wait patiently for 12 million years until his chains are cut off. 12 million years in the tower's void with Lilith's core, Hephaestus's core, Zeus' core, Poseidon's core, and Demeter's core. Uranus snickered, with such conflicting laws within him, we might not need to do anything. He will go insane before he gets freed from his chains. 1773 Some peace at last. Uranus knew more about this subject than anyone else. His personality was utterly crap because of the laws he commanded not mixing well. This made him have countless emotional outbursts. If he was commanding just one law, his personality would be more in tune with one emotion or two at most, which was easily controllable, like Artemis or Demeter. But, when a bunch of laws were mixed in, that's when hell broke loose. Apollo and Lilith were another example. Apollo separated his light-hearted personality and pessimistic dark personality into 2 characters. Lilith had separated her personality into 7 characters, switching between them, wherever she liked. Even she, couldn't maintain a balance between such conflicting personalities related to the sin laws. Felix's situation was worse than theirs. He will figure it out, he always does, Eris remarked calmly. Hey, you have quite a bit of faith in him. Uranus sneered. It's not faith. It's absolute confidence. Eris responded without bothering to turn her head, you should start thinking in the same frequency as me. You have lost twice to him already. It's best not to act smug unless you defeat him. Uranus got irritated but refrained from talking back. He knew that it wasn't befitting to talk *t anymore about Felix unless he delivered. Also, it's not guaranteed that he will stay in the tower. Eris noted casually, if he broke the chains, there is a good chance he will use a wish to leave the tower by sacrificing Demeter's core. So, that's why he said she was his ticket out of the void? Will he dare? Uranus raised an eyebrow in surprise. He believed Felix would ascend with Demeter's core instead of wasting it on another option. It was simply unimaginable to use a Unigen's core as a price for a wish. It's the only viable alternative to secure his escape. With his intelligence, he will easily figure out that we will put our eyes across the entire tower. Eris clarified, in other words, if he decided to abuse his laws and wish to teleport to any floor, he wouldn't make it far with the new punishment. Indeed, he could wish to teleport to the 20th floor and use its advantages to get rid of the new chains easily. Uranus frowned, but, he will know we are camping on the 20th floor. If he has chosen another floor, he has more or less signed his death. This analysis made Uranus understand that there was a high chance of Felix fooling them about remaining in the tower to waste their time. While in reality, he wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice Demeter's core and leave the tower's premises. With no more chains to hold him back, he could go meet up with Apollo's dark side or ditch him completely and hide within his void domain. They were already struggling to catch him, he didn't dare to imagine what would happen to them if they dared to step inside his domain with his peak strength. Then, aren't we f***ed? Uranus clenched his fist in anger, his emotions turning chaotic again. In his eyes, if he was in Felix's place, he wouldn't hesitate to ditch Apollo and return to the matter universe. It's not conclusive yet. Eris grinned as she turned the door's clock hands clockwise. What do you mean? Knowing his ambitious goal, his story in the echoing tower is far from over. Without any clarifications given, Eris stepped inside the dark room, leaving behind one last remark, knock on the door when the engineer arrives. Meanwhile, in the empty stretch of the void, Felix's petrified form drifted peacefully. His body was still encased in thick, stone-like layers, his limbs and torso rendered immobile. However, a crimson mist hovered around his statue-like figure, seemingly chipping away at the damage done by the petrification slowly, but surely. Felix had his soul unpetrified eye closed, putting his body into a deep slumber while he was hanging around with the tenants inside his consciousness space. He had already gotten accustomed to the idea of spending 12 million years in the void weeks ago, though it was quite easy to accept it when he had a town of people inside his mind. Felix was actually experiencing the first moment of peace ever since he had entered the quantum realm, knowing that in this void, he was unreachable, untouchable, and completely safe. Though, he was still indecisive about his next move. Right now, he was seated at the central table with the majority of the tenants, even cows decided to come out of his hiding and join the discussion. While they were giving their own input on the current situation, they were playing a game of poker to pass the time. I suggest you leave at the first opportunity. Elder Kraken said as he folded his cards, you can always return to the quantum realm and meet with Apollo. Plus, you still have his wisp dormant. You can wake him up and come up with a better meeting point. Most of the tenants nodded in approval. You have no more reason to entertain the Unigen's chase and should return to the void realm. Thor added, also, you have to check on Asna quickly before she wakes up. Indeed, spending 12 million years in this void might have a decent time difference, but it is still better to carry on with your original plan as fast as possible. Hormungandr nodded in agreement. Asna. Felix's expression softened a bit after their conversation returned to the love of his life. He never forgot his original goal of saving Asna, and he had yet to complete what he started. At the moment, he was certain that barely an hour or even half of it had passed in the matter universe ever since he stepped into the quantum realm. Although many life-changing experiences happened to him in the span of one person seated in the toilet with his phone, he was still worried that Asna might wake up at any instant. If she did, his entire plan and efforts would go down the gutter. Asna won't be waking up anytime soon, she suffered from a heavy backlash. Lady Sphinx mentioned, unless the three rulers woke her up, but, they have no benefits in doing so. Even so, it's better to leave the tower. Agreed. With this much time in Eris and Uranus' hands, it will be near impossible to escape from the tower without using a wish. Plus, Demeter's core has been sealed by 28 chains. This means if you decide to risk it and ascend with it, you will be inheriting her punishment. Thor noted with a solemn tone. 28 chains was equal to 28 million years. Felix had barely accepted the notion of spending 12 million years in solitude. He refused to think about Demeter's punishment. If Asna's chances of waking up are slim after you finish your punishment, they will be guaranteed if you decide to add Demeter's punishment. Felix went silent, gazing into his cards absent-mindedly. He was holding into a considerable crappy hand for a while now and he had yet to fold. The majority are favoring ditching the tower and returning to the matter universe. It's for a good reason. Felix tapped his finger on the table thoughtfully. Everything that was brought out in the conversation had painted the departure option as the most logical one. However, deep down, Felix felt like something was missing. He was uncomfortable making this decision. His guts told him this was one of the unredeemable mistakes he would never forgive himself if he made it. He knew exactly why. 1774 12 million years later. The Stone of Reality, a treasure like no other, a treasure desired by even the three rulers, a treasure that eluded the strongest Unigens. Felix narrowed his eyes. How could I turn my back on such a treasure? How could I defeat the three rulers and save Asna with my current level of improvement? How could I reach that level when I am contemplating running away from two Unigens? To deal with monsters, you have to be a monster too. Felix continued gazing at his **TTY hand. Monsters are not born in peaceful times or by making the safest decisions. They are born out of desperation and the pits of despair. Felix's gaze turned colder and more menacing. Only the people who crawl out of those pits have the right to fear none, and face all. This void, this punishment, this tower, and this damn chase, those are my pits and I will crawl out of them and stand before the three rulers again. This time, I won't yield. Before anyone could react to the sudden shift in Felix's aura, he pushed all of his coins in and uttered with a tint of madness in his tone, I am all in. While most of the tenants were left puzzled, a faint knowing smirk emerged on Lilith's glossy lips. She was sunbathing near the pool as always with sunglasses on and a bewitching two-piece suit. I wonder if he can handle the truth, his truth when he makes contact with the Stone of Reality. If he can't, will another sigh. She soon broke into a light chuckle while lowering her sunglasses back. I am getting ahead of myself, he might not even be shown the full picture. I just have to wait for the curtains to fall, I guess. 12 million years later, more or less. In the void of time, where seconds stretched into millennia and the emptiness of space flowed like an unending river, Felix and his tenants rested in a state of deep slumber. Having company was great and all, but still, neither Felix nor the tenants had any plans to stay awake for 12 million years, doing nothing but playing games. While the tenants wouldn't really mind it much, it was fatal for Felix. Spending that much time unfocused on one's goal and in complete leisure would extinguish his hunger for improvement and the flames of revenge in his heart. A deep slumber was a must to act as a reset between now and the future. Plus, he needed it to reduce the effects on his personality by his multiple laws. If there was one thing Felix dreaded from this slumber, was waking up to find himself a completely different person. Alas, he could do nothing but wish for the best. Thus, after Felix spent a couple of decades at most hanging around and planning ahead for his future, he turned off the light. Since the heart of the consciousness space was Felix, the moment he decided to sleep, the majority joined him in his decision. To keep an eye on Lilith while he was asleep, he left his wisp awake, but in a deep meditation, which made it impossible to sense the passage of time. After all, he still didn't trust Lilith even though she fed him all sorts of knowledge she had about the first floor and the stone of reality. It's about time. Lilith yawned lazily as she glanced at the sky, noticing the emergence of a golden light in the void. The golden light released from the celestial chains that had bound Felix for 12 million years. The moment it emerged, it tightened around his body, constricting his limbs and torso until the links dug into his flesh, their celestial glow intensifying. This jolt of pressure sent a shockwave through Felix's consciousness, tearing him from his deep sleep. His eyes snapped open, crimson irises blazing in the darkness, his vision was sharp and alert. As the embodiment of sloth sin, he was the one deciding whether to wake up muddled or as sharp as a needle. Wake up! Felix's voice rang out through the consciousness space where his tenants rested. Unlike him, the primogenitors felt like their minds were filled with sludge after waking up. One by one, they gathered in the town's plaza. Some were wearing comfortable pajamas, some were half nude, and some had chosen to sleep in their bestial appearance. Without needing to ask Felix anything, the golden light cast from the heavens above caught their attention. The chains, they are going away. Candace clapped her hands excitedly while wearing cute kitten pajamas, seemingly retiring from her days of being a sexy succubus. Indeed, the chains began to crack and shatter, their links breaking apart into brightness particles without Felix needing to do anything. At least the universe is punctual. Thor yawned while scratching his ass. I can feel it, the strength, the control over the laws, it's back. As the chains vanished, Felix felt a surge of power flood through him. Because of force being standardized across the realm, he couldn't really feel his peak strength. Still, he lifted his hand, his crimson eyes narrowing as he gazed at his clenched fist, sensing that he could dominate the universe again with a mere fist. It seemed like his 7 dragonic tails agreed with him as the tattoos on his arms and chest glowed vividly, the markings of the 7 deadly animals roaring in ink. Congratulations, little paragon! Lilith chuckled, you have successfully survived your first universal punishment. With all the SHT Felix had gone through after his powers were sealed, SHT, calling him a survivor was letting him down gently. Survive, hey? It's a fitting term. Felix's gaze turned more frigid, but, no more, I refuse to label myself as a survivor anymore. Then it's time to reclaim what's yours, Lord Shiva uttered. Shut it, don't tell me what to do. Felix retorted with an authoritative voice during cracking his stiff neck back and forth. Lord Shiva and the tenants were left stunned by such a disrespectful remark, gazing at Felix's expressionless face with a hint of disbelief. They had seen Felix do many things, but he had never disrespected any of them once even when he had reached his current godly level. Being overly stronger than them never made Felix treat them like sh*t or that they were below them. He was still respecting their opinions and teachings, considering them as his masters and elders. That was his character and one of the reasons why he came this far. Yet, he didn't appear to realize what he said. What's the matter? Felix switched to his wisp and gazed at them with a regal aura that demanded respect. Most people remained silent, fearing Felix's harsh response if anyone spoke up. This feeling didn't affect his masters. Felix, how do you feel? Lady Sphinx questioned with a deep frown during walking around him, seemingly studying him. Can you stop? Felix narrowed at her irritatedly, I don't like your gaze, I am not your lab rat. Felix. Ramongandra gave him a stern look, aren't you hearing yourself? Hearing what? Felix narrowed his eyes in confusion, what's wrong with everyone? You really don't see your character change? Marvelous. Lady Sphinx wasn't bothered by Felix's disrespect. As a veteran researcher, such emotions had no place in her heart. Don't waste your time with him. Lilith appeared suddenly on the plaza, sitting on the fountain's edge with an apple in hand, and a see-through robe, hiding almost nothing out of her swimsuit. Her appearance caused two conflicting emotions to rise and overwhelm Felix's emotional state, lust/wrath. He lusted after her, but at the same time, he couldn't forget what she had done to him, just the thought of it caused his blood to boil. Easy there, little cutie. Lilith winked at him seductively, we can play later. Can you handle me? Felix's eyes turned pink for a moment before becoming red again. B*tch, what are you performing to me? This time, Felix felt the peculiar changes within him and how it was extremely difficult to control them. Haha, how fun, seeing someone else go through it. Lilith giggled with an unbothered expression. When she saw that no one was laughing with her and was giving her icy glares, she clicked her tongue in criticism. One can't have fun anymore. She waved her hand, switching her outfit to a modest one, knowing that Felix was in a sensitive state now. If he felt like his lust was taking control over him, this might trigger his wrath and pride, which in turn, could result in him attacking Lilith. She had no interest in turning matters physical. If it was possible to see through our behavior and figure out what's wrong with it, most Unigens wouldn't have struggled with our personalities and emotions, Lilith said casually during biting her apple. Lilith waved her finger and a spiritual mirror appeared before Felix, showing how he was behaving now and before to put it in perspective. The moment Felix saw how he treated his master, Lord Shiva, and even Lilith compared to how he was 12 million years ago, a chill coursed down his spine. That's me, it can't be. He murmured, his pupils widened in shock and dread, feeling like he was watching a skinwalker. 1775 A chaotic persona. Felix already anticipated some changes to his persona after he woke up, but he always believed that he would at least be able to notice the changes. To see himself insulting his master Lady Sphinx after everything they had gone through together was something he never imagined. Master, I am SOR. You don't have to. Lady Sphinx uninterrupted his apology, I have heard worse. It's clear that it wasn't you. Thor nodded, you should prioritize finding a way to contain those changes. Felix's eyes shone gold as he opened his mouth, hinting at putting Thor in his place. However, Felix closed his mouth with great difficulty and started thinking of things that relaxed him. Immediately after, a wave of peacefulness washed over him, making him feel like he was meditating under a waterfall. The golden light in his eyes was replaced with a hazy blue light. Oh ho! Did you tap into your water laws to tune down your pride? Lilith chuckled, not bad, you are a quick learner. Hearing her condescending tone made a vein pop in Felix's neck, but he kept thinking of a happy and relaxing place, allowing his water/ice law embodiment to chill him down. A moment later, he opened his eyes again and sighed in relief with a chilling air coming out of his nose and lips. Luckily, I have water/ice laws to cancel out the outbursts. He referred to them as outbursts since he almost had no control over them. He felt like it didn't matter who stood before him, if he dared to give him advice or tell him what to do, his pride embodiment would lash out instantly. After all, he was one of the strongest Unigens in the universe and the embodiment of pride sin, how could his persona allow him to listen to those below him? It's useful now, but with more time passes, you won't be able to cancel out the outbursts. Lilith remarked casually, this is nothing, you are just touching upon the changes. If you lived for billions of years like us, the only way forward is to separate and categorize your personality. The tenants nodded with solemn expressions, feeling like it would get tougher and tougher to live with Felix if nothing was done. After all, he was the paragon of sins, the worst possible kind of feelings one could have for his persona. They weren't referred to as sins for no reason. They do more harm than good for anyone. To be their embodiment, Felix would turn more evil with time until nothing matters in his life, but himself. What kind of life was that? I have 7 dragonic tails, Can I separate those feelings to each one? Felix wondered with a serious tone. Lilith was able to separate her persona into 7 characters without having the 7 tails. In his eyes, it should be easier for him. He was correct. You can, but there is a downside. Lilith remarked, if you want to utilize your 7 sins, you have to do it through your dragonic heads now. Just like when I bring out my perfect clones. Felix raised an eyebrow. Exactly. It's not so bad. Felix wasn't too bothered, it's a fair price to pay for my sanity. While this would force Felix to always have his dragonic tails active on duty since he needed to order them to activate the abilities he desired, he would take it any day over the new chaotic persona. Also, this was a mere temporary solution. This means you will be left with lightning, void, water, and fire-based laws. Candace said, fortunately, the void law has no severe emotional change since it represents nothingness, Candace said. Lightning influences both wrath and pride mildly, so even if you placed your wrath/pride laws on the sidelines, you will still be affected by them. Thor added. Though, your water/ice laws will cancel out the strong personality effects of fire/magma laws. Lady Sphinx noted, you will at least not turn into Hephaestus. Indeed, if Felix sealed out the disturbance caused by his 7 sins embodiment in his tails, he could handle the rest of the laws. This is nothing but a bandage. Felix frowned, what am I going to do if I added more laws? How am I supposed to behave when my actions will be dominated by the soup of laws within me? While the solution was good, it didn't satisfy Felix fully. He understood that it would be impossible for him to take on the 3 rulers when he could not even control his own actions. There is an easy solution for this, Lilith said with a faded grin. When Felix noticed her grin, he knew he wouldn't like it. What is it? He asked, narrowing his eyes. It's simple really. Lilith stretched her arms behind her back as she disclosed, all you have to do is ascend with Eris Core. Although he expected an insane answer, he was still left stunned. The rest of the tenants shared the same reaction as him. Interesting. Lord Marduk interjected, with Felix's laws mismatched, it gives birth to chaos within him. If he had the law of order, he could balance the chaos within him quite easily with a thought. Is that true? Candace raised an eyebrow in surprise. Why do you think Eris is always calm and unbothered? Lilith said with a hint of envy in her voice, that 4-eyed witch has always been enjoying her peace unlike us due to her laws. While the tenants nodded in understanding, Felix's eyes flashed with a green light, representing his greed taking hold of him. Eris Core, it's the solution to all my problems. I need it, no, I must have it at all cost. He thought, his eyes reflecting an unhealthy level of greed. Before it could do more damage and force him to make a move at Eris right this instant, Felix swiftly tapped into his water/ice laws again. So annoying, I can't work like this. Felix tightened his fists in irritation, feeling like he was forced to babysit his own mind. Thus, before he could carry on with the discussion, he decided to start the process of separation. It was impossible to come up with a logical plan when he was being pulled around by his emotions. Before he could ask her, Lilith helped him with the method. Just visualize the aspects of your personality affected by your sin laws, then make a wish to detach from them. She added, don't forget to link them with your 7 dragonic tails. In her case, she had to create 7 wisps and link each one with her law embodiment through a wish, but, since Felix's 7 dragonic tails had their own souls, his situation was more straightforward. Easy enough. Felix nodded. One by one, Felix began to visualize the aspects of his personality related to wrath, pride, envy, greed, lust, gluttony, and sloth until the tenets appeared before him alone. Each law of his psyche manifested as a mist with distinct colors and auras. Then, he summoned his dragonic tails. Next, Felix approached the first dragon head, representing wrath. He touched his forehead to the dragon's snout, and with a whispered wish, he transferred the core of wrath into the creature. He repeated this process with each dragonic head until Felix was completely detached from his 7 sins laws. The price wasn't too bad since Felix wasn't asking for anything outrageous. I don't feel much difference, Felix murmured as Felix closed and opened his palm. Obviously, you didn't remove those emotions completely. As I said, you just moved the representation of the laws to your dragonic heads, which meant, the tenants are the ones who would feel the full brunt of your actions, Lilith explained. I see. Felix nodded in understanding. With all things considered, this wasn't a bad solution, and if Felix wanted to get rid of it completely, Felix was already given the key. Now, where have we been? Felix narrowed his eyes coldly. Eris, right?